Chapter 1962 The Number One Inner Disciple What? Watching as the world rotate around him, all that was in Wang Jiandong's mind was incredulity. Even in his moment of death, he did not believe what was happening to him. He had driven his sword intent and sharpened his concentration to their limits. He had been prepared to meet anything that came his way. He had intended to last as long as he could against his opponent and put up a good fight. But as soon as the other party made his move, the world had begun rotating around him. Everything had ended before he knew it. When did the other party make the move? How did the other party make the move? He realized that he knew nothing at all. Was such a swift sword humanly possible? Lu Jie, I'm sorry. I was thinking of sounding out the other party's moves for your reference. Bu strength is limited. To the other party, I am probably no different from an unmoving target. With a heart filled with regrets, Wang Jiandong dissipated into light fragments. Beneath the dueling ring, Liu Lujie witnessed everything that had happened clearly with his eyes, and he nearly blacked out. That was the third strongest expert among the inner disciples, yet, he had helplessly been killed in a single move. How in the world did something like this happen? Will I really be a match against such a fast sword? Liu Lujie fell into deep thought. Deep inside, he already had a clear answer in his mind. There was no way he could block that blow. However, he was unwilling to give up just that. His tenacity did not allow him to give up just because a stronger opponent was standing before him. There had never been an obstacle that had brought him down before, and he did not think that this would be any different. All of a sudden, the fighting will in his eyes flared up once more. I get it. I get it. Jiandong, your death wasn't in vain. You didn't manage to force him into revealing his trump card, but I have managed to uncover the flaws in his swordsmanship. Liu Lujie clenched his fists tightly as his zhenqi roared within his body. He had finally found a way out of this quandary. Based on his analysis so far, the other party's so-called trump card was much simpler than what they had assumed, and that was his swiftness. His sword was so fast that most opponents he faced would not even be able to react to his attack. Most likely, the other party had comprehended the speed quintessence. Even the greatest might could be overcome, but absolute speed was undefeatable. He had been so interested in finding out what kind of move the other party had executed that such a simple fact had eluded him. In truth, the other party only had a single move, and that was his swiftness. As long as one's sword was swift enough, even an expert of Wang Jiandong's caliber could be decapitated in an instant. There's only one way to avoid a swift sword, and that's to take the initiative. In other words, I just have to be faster. Coming to understand the crux of the other party's strength, Liu Lujie swiftly stumbled upon the answer to overcoming the other party's swordsmanship. Defense was not enough to curb a swift sword, so the only true way to do so was to match its speed. Only by outmaneuvering the other party would he be able to force the other party into revealing his opening. Closing his eyes, Liu Lujie swiftly formulated several offensive maneuvers in his mind, and eventually, he settled upon one of them. He felt that as long as he executed it properly, his chances of victory would be over 70%. While Liu Lujie was still in deep thought, another 20 people had stepped into the dueling ring one after another. Just like those that had gone before them, their heads ended up rolling off their necks. None of them managed to last a single breath. By this point, the crowd was already trembling fearfully as the frightening strength of I am low profile started to seep into their minds. In less than 3 minutes, I am low profile had already killed 40 opponents, and 7 of them were ranked in the top 100. There was even the third ranker Wang Jiandong among the victims. Yet, no one had managed to land even a single blow on I am profile so far. Not only that, no one had been able to make sense of how the other party had managed to kill them. Initially, they had thought that they could eventually grind down this fellow with sheer numbers, but right now their confidence was wavering. In their minds, I am low profile had already transformed from an ordinary human into a callous grim reaper. Every move he made would signify a decapitation. It was almost as if this had become a rule on this dueling ring. It did not matter how many opponents he was facing or how powerful his opponent was. Seeing that morale had fallen to an all-time low, Liu Lujie shouted, "Everyone, don't panic. He's only a single man. We have more than enough people to take him down. Even if we stand here and allow him to kill us, how many of us will he be able to take down? Indeed. He might be powerful, but he's only a single man. We can't lose. Otherwise, what will other people think of us? Losing our money is a small deal. What's more important is that the sect will surely punish us for our weakness. Liu Lujie's shout made everyone snap out of their fear, and their eyes began blazing with fighting spirit once more. Everyone, I have been analyzing his swordsmanship thus far, and the crux of his strength is simply his speed. It's not as complicated as what you are imagining. As long as we are able to move faster than him, he will be a goner, Liu Lujie said as he slowly made his way over to the dueling ring. I'll kill him right now so as to show you that there are plenty of experts among the inner disciples. Hearing Liu Lujie's words, the crowd swiftly widened their eyes in realization. Indeed. It was their inability to comprehend low profile's attacks that made him seem more frightening than he truly was. However, if all the other party had was speed, as long as they were able to move faster than the other party would be nothing at all. A swift sword was formidable, but it was highly demanding on one's vitality and zhenqi. Given the limitations on his cultivation imposed by the ethereal hall, how much longer could low profile keep up with such speed? To be able to see through all of this, it seems like that friend over there is a true expert. I wonder if he'll be able to defeat low profile. It doesn't matter whether he's able to defeat low profile or not. The knowledge that low profile is using speed to overwhelm his opponents is a crucial piece of information. This means that the sacrifices of those that came before haven't been in vain. As long as we go at him relentlessly, he will eventually wear himself out. As Liu Lujie made his way to the dueling ring, the crowd instinctively opened up a path for him as they roared cheers of support. Liu Lujie was currently using a new ethereal token, and the nickname that he was using was different from before. As such, no one knew that he was actually the number one expert of the inner disciples. Hearing the confident declaration from the new challenger, Zhongxian could not help but chuckle softly. You said that speed is the crux of my strength. How was his move fast at all? This was nothing more than an ordinary slash from him after comprehending that sword intent. The more powerful one's sword intent was, the greater the burden on one's zhenqi, physical body, and soul. His current ancient sage Wan Dan would not be able to bear the burden of executing a truly swift sword. In fact, even his real ancient sage 4 Dan consummation body would not be able to bear the pressure from unleashing the sword intent that he had captured with his golden page. As such, all he could only showcase a sliver of what he was truly capable of. Nevertheless, while the other party's analysis wasn't completely accurate, it was a good attempt. From the looks of it, it appeared that the new challenger was a fairly decent sword practitioner. Usually, he would be interested in seeing what the other party was capable of, but it was a pity carrot currently a little too feeble. He could not afford to squander any of his strength. Furthermore, he was pressed for time, so he could only end this quickly. Let's begin. While such thoughts were running through Zhongxian's mind, Liu Lujie had already gotten into the ring and readied himself. Who? He swiftly harmonized together with his sword before dashing forth like a burst of wind. Due to the sheer speed that he was moving at, the tip of his sword released a deafening rumbling reminiscent of the roar of thunder. Swift. But this move looks rather familiar. I feel like I've seen it somewhere before. It's the Sword of Thunder call. Legend has it that the elder who created this technique was inspired by a streak of lightning in the sky. This swordsmanship allows one to move with speed as fast as lightning and strength as frightening as thunder. That swordsmanship is one of the top 3 sword arts within the Inner Disciples library, but it's simply so hard that most who try give up eventually. So far, among the Inner Disciples, there's only one person who has succeeded. Wait a moment, you can't mean to say that the person in the dueling ring is. The new challenger moved with such agility that the crowd could hardly keep up with his movements. A huge uproar broke out among them. It was a well-known fact that only senior Liu Lujie had mastered this move. This was more than enough to verify the identity of the new challenger. It seemed like even the number one expert of the Inner Disciples had decided to make a move to teach that arrogant fellow a lesson. That brat is finally done for. That fellow's tricks will be swiftly unraveled under Senior Liu's ingenuity. Everyone's eyes lit up in excitement as they cheered for Liu Lujie. In their hearts, Liu Lujie was an undefeatable legend. He had dominated the number 1 spot for 7 years now, and no one had come close to even shaking his position so far. With such an expert making a move, I am low profile would surely fall into defeat. With that, there was no way he would act arrogantly anymore. Back to the dueling ring, Liu Lujie was completely oblivious to the fact that his identity had been revealed. At that very moment, his complete attention was focused on his sword art. Knowing that his opponent's sword was capable of moving at inhuman speeds, he dared not let his guard down for even a second. Any opening that he showed could very well become his undoing. With his incredible speed, he covered over a dozen meters in the blink of an eye, but for some reason, perhaps because I am low profile was caught off guard or was simply that confident in his abilities, the other party remained rooted to the spot, not moving at all. Are you still not going to make a move, or are you unable to make a move? It seemed like his guess was right. The only thing that the other party had was his speed. With him outdoing the other party's speed, there was no longer anything the other party could do. Victory was his to claim. Voila. But as this thought was circling in his mind, he suddenly felt a chilling sensation ahead of him. Glancing upward, his eyes widened in disbelief. At some point in time, the other party had lifted his sword and placed it in the trajectory of his movement, waiting for him to crash into it. As he was moving too fast, he was not even able to pull off a sidestep. Before he could say a word, the sword had already plunged right through his head. Putong. His body fell lifelessly to the ground. Next. Zhong Xian shouted out. The other party's movements were rather fast, so he had chosen to place his sword in the path of the other party. As he had expected, the other party had ended up running right into his blade, thus allowing him to achieve a headshot without even exerting much strength. Senior Liu was killed just like that. What's even more frightening is that I am low profile didn't even exert any strength. All he did was hold his sword in position, and Senior Liu simply ran right into it. Didn't Senior Liu say something about defeating speed with greater speed? The crowd shuddered in fear. At this moment, they were on the verge of a mental breakdown. Even the number 1 expert of the inner disciples had been killed with such ease. Just how powerful was I am low profile? What's wrong? Is there no one who dares fight me anymore? Can I take it that all of you are admitting defeat? Zhong Xian could not help but realize that the crowd had gone completely silent after he defeated the previous opponent, so he could not help but ask them that with a frown. Even when he defeated Wang Jiandong, the crowd did not react in such a manner. Could it be that the earlier opponent was a famous figure among the inner disciples? Thus, he turned to one of the more vocal inner disciples and asked, "Is the person whom I just killed someone who is deeply respected among the inner disciples?" "Why you?" Hearing those words, the inner disciple nearly fainted on the spot. "Did you not feel anything different while fighting him? You were going against the number 1 expert of the inner disciples. Surely you felt his extraordinary aura and superior strength. Feel anything different?" Zhong Xian's frown deepened. Was I supposed to feel anything about him? Other than his decent speed, it doesn't seem like there's anything special about him at all. It was true that the previous challenger was fast, but his inability to control his speed properly made him extremely easy to kill. The current situation was just like a bunch of ants trying to oppose a human. Would a human be able to sense who was the stronger one among the ants? It was not like it made any difference at all. He's the number 1 expert of the inner disciples, Senior Liu Lujie, the inner disciple cried out. "Oh, he's the number 1 expert?" Zhong Xian frowned doubtfully. "Even though he's so weak?" The crowd. Chapter 1963 by Wanqing is here. In the courtyard located at the peak of the inner disciples mountain, Wang Jiandong slowly opened his eyes. Feeling a little giddy, he clutched his head for a moment. Wang Jiandong meditated for a moment to recover from his abnormal condition before murmuring with a bitter smile, "It doesn't feel too good to have my head lopped off." He would usually be the one killing others in that dueling ring, and it was his first time experiencing his head being sliced off. While physical harm incurred in the ethereal hall would not be transferred into the real world, The mental pressure in that moment still left his heart thumping wildly. Even though I lost an ethereal token, I hope that I have allowed Senior Lugier to see through that fellow's swordsmanship. It would be good if he's able to achieve victory, Wang Jiandong muttered. To be honest, he was full of awe toward Liu Lugier. Over the years, no matter how many formidable moves he had learned or what kind of maneuvers he executed, it was all futile in the face of Liu Lugier's absolute strength. It was as if he was a kid trying to fool around with an adult. To him, Liu Lugier's strength was as unfathomable as an abyss. It was just like how in a school exam, even if you scored 99 marks whereas a genius scored 100, the difference between you and the genius would not just lie in that single mark. It was just that the paper only had 100 marks for the genius to score. As long as Liu Lugier could see through the other party's moves, he should be able to win with ease. Dong dong dong. While Wang Jiandong was still in deep thought, he suddenly heard knocking outside. Who would visit at such an hour? Wang Jiandong murmured as he stood up and walked to the entrance of the residence. Usually, as this was Liu Lugier's residence, it would be inappropriate for him to receive the door the other party's place. However, as Liu Lugier was currently dealing with low profile in the ethereal hall, he could only receive the guest in his place. Jia. Opening the door, Wang Jiandong saw a few inner disciples looking at him with their heads lowered fearfully. One of them anxiously said, "Senior Liu, we beg your pardon for visiting at such an ungodly." But before they could finish their words, they realized that the person before them was not Liu Lugier. With an awkward chuckle, they quickly corrected their words. "Our apologies, Senior Wang. May we know if Senior Liu is inside?" "What's wrong?" Wang Jiandong asked with a frown. He recognized these fellows, but they had never interacted with one another before. They were not even in the top 1,000 among the inner disciples. Why were they looking for Senior Liu? Senior Liu is the #1 expert of the inner disciples, and he boasts great influence here. "There's a matter that we would like to trouble him with," the inner disciple said with a reddened face. "He's not free." Seeing that they were here to ask for a request, Wang Jiandong replied impatiently and prepared to close the door. It was true that Liu Lugier possessed great influence among the inner disciples due to his position, but how busy would he be if he helped anyone who came knocking? A precedent could not be set, or else it would cause a great deal of trouble in the future. Not free? What haughty words! Are all inner disciples nowadays so arrogant? As soon as Wang Jiandong finished his words, a cold feminine voice sounded behind the inner disciples. Raising his gaze, he saw a demure-looking young lady walking over with a displeased expression on her face. Upon taking a close look at the other party's appearance, Wang Jiandong's eyebrows shot up in horror. He quickly clasped his fist and greeted, "Senior Bai." The person who had appeared was none other than the renowned tyrant of the core disciples, Bai Wanqing. She was neither the strongest nor the most talented among the core disciples, but she had a formidable grandfather, who happened to be one of the 3 grand elders, Elder Bai Yi. Even though Elder Bai Yi had been injured recently, no one would dare take their chances. As such, even though Bai Wanqing had beaten up a lot of core disciples, no one dared do anything to her. Instead, all of them kept their distance from her and tried their best not to cross her path. She had never involved herself in the affairs of the inner disciples before, so why would she suddenly pay Senior Liu a visit? Seeing through Wang Jiandong's doubts, Bai Wanqing explained, "I am here to engage Liu Lugier's help in finding an inner disciple. He should be able to do it, right?" "Of course, Senior Liu, and I would never turn down a request from you, Senior Bai." Wang Jiandong nodded. How could he possibly turn this female dinosaur down? If he angered the other party, he would risk having his eggs of life crushed by a kick. No matter how frustrated he was, he could only bear with it. Even core disciples did not dare turn down a request from Bai Wanqing lightly, let alone inner disciples like them. "Senior Bai, please come in." Wang Jiandong quickly invited her into the residence to have a seat. After settling down in the main hall, Wang Jiandong leaned forward a little and asked, "May I know which foolish inner disciple has offended you, Senior Bai? Feel free to name him, and I'll have my men investigate the matter right away." "He didn't offend me, but I have some business with him," Bai Wanqing said with a frown, but she did not bother to waste her time explaining the matter. With a flick of her wrist, she took out a painting and said, This is a painting of his appearance. Bai Wanqing was not just a skilled sword practitioner, she was also an expert in ink painting. Her drawing of Zhongxian was accurate to the finest detail, making it seem extremely lifelike. His painting. Wang Jiandong took the painting and examined it carefully. A moment later, he shook his head and said, "My apologies, but I have never met this person before." He had been an inner disciple for many years, and he practically knew all the inner disciples in Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion. However, he was certain that he had never seen this person before. "You've never seen him before? What about Liu Lujie? Where is he? Bring him here to check the painting," Bai Wanqing said. "Senior Liu is currently sparring with someone in the ethereal hall." Wang Jiandong quickly replied. "Sparring?" Bai Wanqing frowned. "Isn't he the #1 expert of the inner disciples? Is there anyone who is a match for him in the ethereal hall? As the #1 expert of the inner disciples, would Liu Lujie not simply defeat all of his opponents with ease? Was there any point to sparring with others there then? Not too long ago, an arrogant sword practitioner named I Am Low Profile appeared in the ethereal hall. However, it shouldn't be an issue anymore. With Senior Liu making a move, he should be able to defeat the other party swiftly," Wang Jiandong said with a smile. Halfway through his words though, the sound of a stool falling to the ground echoed from the courtyard. Looking over, he saw Liu Lujie walking over with a ghastly pale face. "Senior Liu." Wang Jiandong and the other inner disciples quickly rose to their feet and greeted him. Still seated calmly in her chair, Bai Wanqing glanced at the young man who had just entered the main hall and asked, "Are you Liu Lujie?" Noticing the esteemed guest in the room, Liu Lujie quickly clasped his fist and greeted her. Paying respects to Senior Bai. "Senior, how did it go? Did you manage to get him?" Wang Jiandong asked anxiously. However, Liu Lujie shook his head and gloomily replied, "I was defeated by him." "Why you were defeated?" Wang Jiandong recoiled in shock. "Senior Liu, did you manage to force him into showing his true sword art?" "Well." Liu Lujie shook his head bitterly once more. "I charged at him as swiftly as I could, but he ended up piercing my head with his sword. Just like that, I died." "He pierced your head with his sword?" Wang Jiandong was stunned. He was willing to admit his defeat, but this was Senior Liu they were talking about. He was the #1 expert of the inner disciples, yet, he had been defeated in a single move. Just who in the world was that fellow? From which hole did he pop out of? Noticing the slight change in the atmosphere, Bai Wanqing asked, "What happened?" "Senior Bai, it's like this." Liu Lujie quickly recounted the entire matter to Bai Wanqing. Someone haughtily challenged all of the inner disciples at once in the ethereal hall. Bai Wanqing was stunned by the explosive news. "There's actually another person who is even more arrogant than me in the sect." All in all, there were over 10,000 inner disciples in the sect and he had actually challenged all of them at once. That was insane. She had thought that she was already the cockiest person in the sect due to her grandfather covering her, but to think that there was actually someone who could top her act. More importantly, despite being so pompous, he still sarcastically used the nickname I Am Low Profile, as if mocking everyone else. Vicious. There was truly no one more condescending than him. "I would like to meet that fellow." Bai Wanqing stood up with fighting will flaring in her eyes. The reason she was called a female dinosaur was not just because of her explosive temper. More than that, it was because she liked fighting and was darned good at it. With such an expert appearing among the inner disciples, how could she possibly not be moved? Her fighting will had been ignited, and it would not be quelled until she exchanged blows with the person in question. "Senior Bai, you are a core disciple. It would be a breach of the rules if you headed over." Liu Lujie's face reddened. No matter what, this was a battle among the inner disciples. It did not feel appropriate for Senior Bai to involve herself in this. "I'll just head in there to take a look and see if it's a core disciple pretending to be an inner disciple to cause trouble." Bai Wanqing swiftly found herself an excuse. "Of course, I'll just take a look at what kind of moves he has." This. Liu Lujie hesitated a little. While he did say earlier that I Am Low Profile could not be a core disciple, but what if that was really the case? After his fight with the latter, Such doubts had started popping up in his mind. The excuse that Bai Wanqing had come up with was legitimate, and it was not a huge deal for her to head in to take a look. This was a good chance for him to determine if the other party was actually a core disciple in disguise. If that was truly the case, it would be meaningless for him to pit himself against the other party. "I'll be troubling you, Senior Bai," Liu Lujie replied. He took out 2 ethereal tokens and passed one to Bai Wanqing. As for the other one, he was going to use it for himself. In order to better disguise themselves, most inner disciples chose to carry a couple of tokens with them. In a sense, it was similar to how some people had multiple social media accounts for different purposes. "It's no trouble at all. While I take a look at who that fellow is, I'll help you find the flaws in his moves so that you can defeat him. Then, I need you all to help me investigate who this person is," Bai Wanqing said as she gestured at the painting. "I don't like owing favors to others, so let's call it even with this." "Yes, Elder Bai," Liu Lujie nodded. Together with Wang Jiandong, the two of them quickly entered the ethereal hall once more. Using another ethereal token, the both of them assumed different nicknames and appearances. Bai Wanqing did not forget to conceal her appearance in order to prevent others from identifying her as well. After their disguising work was done, the 3 of them quickly headed for the dueling ring. By the time they arrived, there was already a massive crowd around the area. While they were gone, news had been spreading like wildfire among the inner disciples, and those who were absent quickly entered the ethereal hall. There was a tense and fiery atmosphere in the air. When Liu Lujie and the others first arrived on the scene, a group of 12 happened to step into the dueling ring. However, they were killed by I Am Low Profile in the blink of an eye. In the next moment, yet another wave of opponents stepped into the dueling ring. It felt never-ending, like the relentless tides. Liu Lujie swiftly grabbed a nearby disciple and asked, "How many people has he eliminated so far?" "Probably around 200, I think. Those who get into the dueling ring are pretty much killed in an instant. No one has been able to last more than a single move against him. Even senior Liu Lujie was sliced in 2 with a single move from him," the inner disciple replied agitatedly. While he felt enraged by this fellow's arrogant challenge, there was no denying that he was extremely powerful. Even the number 1 expert of the inner disciples had been killed so easily, so there was no way the others could be a match for him. They could only hope to rally more people and swarm him with sufficient numbers. Slowly, they would grind him down before dealing a killing blow. "He has already eliminated 200 people?" Liu Lujie's eyebrows shot up. How long had it been since he left? 3 minutes? 5 minutes? Yet, that fellow actually eliminated 170 people within this short span of time? The heck? That was too much. It was as if inner disciples were no different from ants to the other party. Liu Lujie turned to Bai Wanqing and asked, "Senior Bai, could that person really be a core disciple in disguise?" This. After assessing the figure in the dueling ring for a moment, Bai Wanqing shook her head and said, "None of you are able to force him into showing his hand, so I can't say for sure." Chapter 1964. We're all in this together. 1964. We're all in this together. In terms of appearance and gestures, Bai Wanqing could not think of any core disciples who were similar to I Am Low Profile. Then again, the other party would have surely disguised himself well before entering this ethereal hall, so it was meaningless to make deductions based on that. The best way to figure out his identity was to force him into revealing his true capabilities. I Am Low Profile had been fighting for quite some time, but the moves that he had used so far were practically no different from the action of swatting flies. With each swing, he would reap the life of an opponent or 2. There was nothing that one could discern from such a simple action. Even with her deep understanding of the core disciples, there was no way she could recognize the other party from a simple slash. He's simply too powerful. "We aren't able to cause him any stress at all," Liu Lujie remarked bitterly. They had thought that Wang Jiandong would be able to force him into showing his hand, but he had been decapitated in a single slash. When Liu Lujie went up, he had been sliced in 2. They were the first and third of the inner disciples. If even they did not stand a chance, what could the others hope to do? Furthermore, the other party had killed 200 inner disciples so far, but he did not even look tired. With the other party's skills, It felt like it would not make a difference no matter how many people they piled into the dueling ring. Don't worry. Let me give it a try. A glimmer of excitement surfaced in Bai Wanqing's eyes. As a core disciple and the granddaughter of one of the 3 grand elders, she had a deep understanding of swordsmanship despite her young age. If it was in the real world, she would be able to pull off what I Am Low Profile was doing, killing an opponent with a single slash each. However, with the pathetic body that was allocated by this ethereal hall, she would not have the stamina or zhengqi to kill so many people and still be standing at the end of it. In other words, there was a good chance that the person in the dueling ring was even stronger than her. Before such an expert, as a battle maniac and a female dinosaur, it was only natural that she would want to test the other party herself. Senior Bai. Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong looked at one another awkwardly. You are a core disciple. If you are caught interfering in a conflict among inner disciples. It was true that they had some lingering doubts about I Am Low Profile being a core disciple, but there was also a chance that he might really be an inner disciple who had cultivated hard over the years. In the first place, it was already disadvantageous for him to have to face so many opponents at once. If they brought a core disciple in as well, their reputation would really be torn to shred. Just the sheer embarrassment would be enough to kill them. I'm using your ethereal token at the moment. As long as neither of you say a word, no one will know a thing, Bai Wanqing said with a grand wave of her hand. There's no need to say anything more. I'm just going to test that fellow and verify his identity. As soon as I confirm that he isn't a core disciple, I'll immediately admit defeat. You can rest assured that I have no plans of interfering with this matter. Of course, if he's a core disciple, I'll get rid of him for you in view of the sect rules. This. Liu Lujie hesitated for a moment before bowing deeply. We'll be troubling you, Senior Bai. What the other party said made sense. If she was just going into the dueling ring to test I Am Low Profile skills, it would not contravene the rules of the sect. Senior Bai, be careful. That fellow's sword is extremely fast, Wang Jiandong advised softly. Fast? Ha, that's one thing that I'm not afraid of. From the age of 5, Grandpa Bai Feng would take me to the northernmost winterlands to practice the heavy snow swordsmanship every year. It has been 15 years since then, and I have already mastered the technique to major accomplishment. With such swordsmanship, do you think that I would fear the speed of his sword? Bai Wanqing replied proudly. The other party might be skilled in swift maneuvers, but that was even more so for her. It was through the swiftness of her movements that she was able to strike the vitals of the other core disciples before they could even react. Heavy snow swordsmanship? Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong had heard that Bai Wanqing was a formidable sword practitioner, but they had not been aware of the swordsmanship that she practiced. So, when they heard the name of the sword art, their eyes lit up in excitement. The heavy snow swordsmanship was renowned within the sect. It had been created by an expert 1,000 years ago during a snowy day. If one cultivated it to the peak, one would be able to deal 6 slashes in the time that a snowflake took to descend to shave off its 6th tip. Without its sides to cushion its fall, a snowflake would become no different from a snowball, resulting in the acceleration of its fall. This was also the inspiration behind the name of the technique, heavy snow swordsmanship. Snowflakes were known for their lightness, such that even the slightest gust of wind could blow them away. As such, the sword practitioner had to control their strength to the finest degree, and the speed of their movement needed to be incredible. As someone who had achieved the level of major accomplishment in a technique like that, Bai Wanqing's speed and control had long reached a level far beyond their comprehension. If that's the case, I Am Low Profile will surely be no match for Senior Bai. Liu Lujie remarked with a nod. He lowered his back once more and earnestly said, Senior Bai, pardon me for saying this, but I beseech you to halt after testing his identity. Please allow the inner disciples to deal with him instead. Regardless of whether I Am Low Profile was a core disciple or not, it was still a fact that he had challenged and insulted all the inner disciples. If they had to rely on an outsider to deal with him, it would reflect badly on them. I didn't know that you were so noisy. Fine, I'll leave him to you. Bai Wanqing waved her hand impatiently as she walked up to the dueling ring. Everyone, stop. I'm going to have a solo fight with I Am Low Profile. Bai Wanqing commanded. As a core disciple, her comprehension of swordsmanship far surpassed that of everyone on the scene. Even without making a move, she was able to exert an indescribable pressure on those around her. I don't really know who she is, but she seems to be very powerful. I feel like my sword intent has been suppressed to the extent that I can't even drive it properly anymore. It's the same for me. I've never felt such powerful sword intent from the other inner disciples before, so she could very well be a sword ascetic. In terms of swordsmanship, it's very likely that she's on par with Senior Liu. Let's just step back and watch the situation for the time being. She might just be able to get rid of that fellow and exact vengeance on our behalf. In deference to the powerful sword intent that Bai Wanqing was emanating, those who were intending to climb into the dueling ring chose to heed her words and back down. True sword ascetics were rare, but they would still show up from time to time among the inner disciples, so most of the cultivators there knew of their existence. Despite their lack of fame, their true strength could easily rival the top 10 sword practitioners among the inner disciples. It was highly likely that both the senior who had just stepped onto the stage and I am low profile were sword ascetics. Seeing yet another self-assuming sword practitioner coming onto stage, Zhongxian shook his head and sighed impatiently. Hurry up if you wish to make a move. You can also see that there are many people queuing behind you, waiting to be killed too. This kind of opponent was particularly troublesome. It was as if they were born with a natural inclination for fanfare and sticking out like a sore thumb. Otherwise, why would they have to specially demand a one-to-one battle and waste everyone's time? It's been long since I've met someone as brazen as you. Bai Wanqing scoffed as she swiftly drew her sword and released a powerful slash toward Zhongxian. Heavy snow swordsmanship. Right from the very start of the battle, she had already utilized her trump card. Sword chi burst forth and formed a violent snowstorm in the dueling ring. White snowflakes descended from the sky, blurring one's sight. How is it? Am I fast? Bai Wanqing did not rush into continuing with her offense after executing her swordsmanship. Instead, she looked at Zhongxian with a confident smile on her lips. Even though she had boasted to Liu Lujie and the others that she had reached major accomplishment in the heavy snow swordsmanship, the truth was that her mastery was still a little lacking. She was unable to bring out such prowess every single time. This time, she knew that she was facing a powerful opponent, so she pushed herself to the very limits. Under this pressure, she actually managed to bring forth a might beyond what she was usually capable of. Even out of 10 executions, it was unlikely that even one would be as powerful as this. As such, she was extremely excited to see how well things were turning out this time. If it was just a moment ago, she would not have dared claim that she would be able to defeat I am low profile with utmost confidence. However, with the current momentum that she had built up, victory would be a piece of cake for her. Fast! Zhongxian sighed in exasperation. Yes, you are very fast. Are you done executing your technique already? I am pressed for time. After which, he raised his blade and slashed it horizontally. Puha! As soon as Zhongxian raised his blade, Bai Wanqing immediately got into a defensive position to protect herself. But before she knew it, there was a sharp pain on her throat, and the next moment, she was already staring right at her toes. Putong! A corpse collapsed to the ground. Bai Wanqing had been killed as if she was nothing more than an insignificant ant being squashed. Seeing how the crowd was building up faster than the rate at which he was eliminating his opponents, he shook his head in frustration at how inefficient the current system was. He pondered for a moment before making up his mind. Forget it, this is really too slow. All of you should come up at once. Or is the dueling ring a little too small to hold everyone? Shall I come down to fight all of you? Then, without any hesitation, he leaped right into the midst of the crowd. The dueling ring was simply too small, such that it could only fit 10 or so people at once. Anything more than that would be far too tight. At this rate, it would take too long for him to get rid of the thousands that had gathered around the dueling ring. Not to mention, there would be some hero wannabes coming up from time to time demanding a solo duel. What a pain in the ass. He might as well just dash right into the crowd and fight everyone all at once. What? You're asking for it. Everyone, let's make a move together. I don't believe that his two hands will be able to deal with thousands of us all at once. The crowd could hardly believe that the seemingly powerful senior would be unable to last even a breath before I am low profile. And before they could even process this shock, the latter suddenly leaped down of the stage and began massacring everyone. In an instant, the entire situation descended into chaos. In truth, the small size of the dueling ring worked to I am low profile's advantage. It would prevent anyone from easily getting behind him and assaulting him. Yet, that fellow had actually abandoned that advantage and dashed right into the crowd. This meant that he would have to defend against attacks from every direction. Was that even possible? No matter how fast I am low profile was, there was no way he could keep up with 20 swords, 50 swords, or even 100 swords at once. Voila! In an instant, all kinds of sword chi came raining down on I am low profile from all directions. It was as if the entire world was denying his existence. Senior Bai. Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong were utterly frenzied to see that even the heavy snow swordsmanship executed by this female tyrant of a core disciple would fail to stop I am low profile. They were still afraid that Senior Bai would go too far and end the opponent, but from the looks of it, it felt like it made no difference to I am low profile at all. Whether the latter was slaughtering them or Senior Bai, there was simply no pressure to him at all. They would never have thought that the day would come when they would see core disciples, pseudo-immortals, or possibly true immortal experts, actually get slain so easily. Wang Jiandong shook his head and said, "Well, I have to admit that I am low profile is indeed formidable, but he's simply too arrogant. His arrogance will only eventually lead to his downfall. There's no way he'll be able to cope against the encirclement of so many inner disciples at once. No matter how powerful one was, there would eventually be a limit to one's strength, right?" They were all ancient sage Wundan cultivators in the ethereal hall. In terms of strength, they were to equal to one another. No matter how skilled a person, there was no way he could fight against an army of thousands who boasted the same strength as him. Even a powerful martial artist would be overwhelmed by an army of 1,000 grannies. He's probably done for. Liu Lujie shared Wang Jiandong's view as well. He did not think highly of I am low profile's actions. "Senior Liu, there are a lot of people here. Should we make use of this opportunity to sneak in an attack against him?" Wang Jiandong asked as he pulled his thumb over his throat to make a gesture of killing. Chapter 1965 Elder Mu, that won't do. Liu Lujie shook his head adamantly. "We have already fought and lost to him. We only entered the ethereal hall as spectators this time. If everyone could return endlessly after being defeated, there would be no fairness in this duel at all. I am low profile had challenged all the inner disciple at once, and as embarrassing as it might be, it would still be fair for them to go at him one by one. However, if they continued challenging him in a different identity after they had already been killed, they would really become laughingstock once others knew about it. They might have lost, but they had to lose with pride and dignity. At the very least, this was his bottom line as the #1 expert of the inner disciples. "Senior Liu, you're right. I asked an inappropriate question." Wang Jiandong lowered his head in embarrassment. He had been so engrossed in the idea of the getting rid of I am low profile that such a notion had crossed his head. Thinking about it once more, he did agree that it would not be appropriate to take such a course of action. The sword was the conqueror of all weapons. The foundation to mastering the way of the sword started from tempering one's heart. If a sword practitioner could not even conduct themselves with pride and dignity, their sword intent was bound to be weak and impure. Speaking of which, since Senior Bai has been defeated, we should quickly return. Otherwise, I fear that Senior Bai might go berserk after returning to the real world, Liu Lujie said. He was just about to leave the ethereal hall when he suddenly felt a stabbing pain in his throat. He tried to turn his head, but before he knew it, he found himself staring right at his own bottom. The hell! In his peripheral vision, he could see I am low profile marching forth like a relentless war machine. With each step he took, a huge bunch of heads would fly into the air, as if a lively bloodfest. The reason he had been killed was because he had simply been too close to the battle. Some of the sword chi that escaped from the center of battlefield had struck and decapitated him. Even a hint of sword chi leaking out from the other party was enough to kill him. How were they supposed to assassinate the other party like that? Assassinate your head? They would not stand a chance at all. With a resentful look on his face, Liu Lujie's head bounced up and down several times before eventually settling in a patch of grass not too far away. In his last sight, he saw Wang Jiandong's head also bouncing up and down. The expression on the other party's face was also one of melancholy. They were just innocent spectators who had come here to watch the commotion. Where did the law in the world go to? Why would innocent people like them be caught up in this mess? Who? Their consciousness retreated from the ethereal hall, bringing them back to the real world. While his consciousness was being pulled back into his body, he could not help but remember his encounters with I Am Low Profile. The first time, he was impaled in the head. The second time, his head was decapitated while he was watching from a distance. He was a person who had retained the position as the number 1 inner disciple for the past 10 years. His eyes were set on the 10-Li Sword God. When did he become a side character who could be defeated so easily? While he was still feeling exasperated over everything that had happened in the past hour, he finally opened his eyes once more. The first thing he saw was Senior Bai Wanqing trembling before him, and when he took a closer look, he realized that the entire room was a huge mess. It seemed like he was not the only one who could not accept the outcome. A certain someone who had been decapitated right after she had executed her ultimate move was unable to take her defeat and was currently venting her anger on his furniture. It was fortunate that those items were not worth much, or else he would have really suffered a huge loss this time around. Senior Bai, please calm down. Liu Lujie quickly stood up and clasped his fist. With a frosty look on her face, Bai Wanqing glared at Liu Lujie with tightly clenched teeth. Calm down? Do I look angry to you? Liu Lujie's heart immediately turned cold. While he was still at a loss as to how he should respond to the question, his vision blurred. Pilipala. The sound of fists and kicks sinking into flesh echoed loudly in the air. Before long, all the inner disciples within the residence, including Zhu Yanji and Wei Suifeng, were lying on the ground with bruised cheeks and broken noses. It was a truly miserable sight. All right, I feel a little better now. The beating that she had just dished out alleviated the suffocating feeling in Bai Wanqing's heart a fair bit. Taking a deep breath, she assumed her lofty attitude once more and instructed, "Keep a close lookout for the person I told you to look for. Also, make sure the news that I visited you tonight doesn't reach the ears of another person. If I hear anyone talking about this matter, I'll make you regret having been born in this world." Liu Lujie, Wang Jiandong, and the others cowered in fear as they squeezed their thighs together. "I'll be leaving now. Hula." The next instant, Bai Wanqing had already left the area on an aerial beast, disappearing from everyone's sight. To think that a proud core disciple like her would be defeated in a single move in the inner disciple's ethereal hall. She would only have embarrassed herself further by staying there. Wang Jiandong double-checked that the female dinosaur had really left the area before asking with a bitter smile, "What should we do? What else can we do? Given how huge this matter is, we can't possibly hide it any longer. We have to report it to the elders," Liu Lujie said. Even though I Am Low Profile killing them was a huge affair, it would not be too big an issue. However, right now, I Am Low Profile had already killed over 100 inner disciples and even destroyed a core disciple with ease. The situation was far beyond their control. If they did not report it to the elders soon, they would not be able to bear the consequences. "You're right. We should report it to the elders and leave the matter to them." Wang Jiandong quickly nodded in agreement. After coming to an agreement, the two of them quickly made their way out to the courtyard, intending to ride an aerial beast to the quarters of the elders. But at that moment, a sharp beast call came from above. Raising their heads, Liu Lujie and the others saw 10 elders heading toward them on the back of an aerial beast. When they were finally directly above the residence, they quickly leaped down and landed lightly in the courtyard. They were the elders who were responsible for managing the affairs of the inner disciples. Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong, "What's going on in the ethereal hall?" the elder standing at the front asked. This elder had a slightly sunken face and a long green beard. He was dressed in a light grey robe that flowed lightly with his movements. He was the strongest and highest-ranking elder in charge of the affairs of the inner disciples, Elder Mu. He was also the friend whom Elder Lu Yun had encountered outside the Elder Council that kept putting him down. If Zhongxian was there, he surely would have noticed that Elder Lu Yun was standing amid the 10 elders who had just arrived at Liu Lujie's residence. He had just been promoted to an internal elder. Under normal circumstances, he would have had no right to follow behind the rest of them, but due to his merit from having just recruited an exceptionally talented disciple, the sect had made an exception just for him. Elder Mu, a sword practitioner known as I Am Low Profile, has appeared in the Inner Disciples' ethereal hall, and he has challenged all of the inner disciples. Liu Lujie immediately recounted the entire story to Elder Mu. As he had watched the deeds of I Am Low Profile from the very start to the end, he knew the details of the matter. A person challenged all of the inner disciples and has killed several hundred people so far. Even when the two of you went up, you were no match for him as well. Elder Mu frowned as his face turned terrifyingly livid. To think that I have taught you for so many years. How can the two of you be so useless? Liu Lujie's face reddened in embarrassment. Regardless of whether that fellow is an inner disciple or a core disciple, his cultivation is bound to be capped at Ancient Sage 1 done upon entering the ethereal hall. Elder Mu exclaimed in exasperation. Against an opponent of the same realm, how are several hundred of you not able to defeat him? This is a huge disgrace to the inner disciples. It seems like none of you have taken my teachings to heart at all. Elder Mu, I beg your pardon, but I Am Low Profile is simply too powerful a sword practitioner. Wang Jiandong protested indignantly. A load of bulka *p. Elder Mu interjected furiously. How powerful can the opponent possibly be? No matter how formidable his moves appear, they are still from the swordsmanship of our sect. Stop finding excuses for your own weaknesses. It's a pathetic sight. Fine. Wang Jiandong still indignantly wanted to protest against Elder Mu's words, but Liu Lujie gestured for him to stop with a tug on his sleeves. Thus, he could only reluctantly accept it. In truth, he knew that Elder Mu was actually a warm-hearted person who spoke awful words. Often, the things that he said did not reflect his true thoughts. Nevertheless, Wang Jiandong still felt deeply indignant at being criticized in such a manner to his face. After Elder Lu finished speaking his piece, Liu Lujie looked at him and asked, Elder Mu, what should we do? What they needed most was to resolve this matter as soon as possible. Otherwise, the ones who were disgraced would not only be the inner disciples but the elders as well. They enjoyed so many resources from the sect, but the disciples whom they had groomed had ended up being defeated so easily. It would not reflect well on them if word spread. Since we're here, we should go in to take a look as well. I'm curious to know where this fellow came from, conducting himself so lawlessly. Elder Mu waved his hand. If you are really that powerful, you could easily apply for a promotion to become a core disciple or even a sect elder. You would be granted all the fame and fortune you desire. Yet, you chose to challenge the inner disciples instead. This doesn't make sense at all. Somehow, this entire matter felt weirdly fishy to them. They wanted to find out the identity of the person who was messing with them. After confirming the other party's identity, we'll pay him a visit and inquire about the matter. We must try our best to suppress this matter as much as we can. Otherwise, you lot will go down in history as the most worthless batch of inner disciples. Elder Mu harumphed coldly. Yes. Liu Lujie and the others nodded. Prepare some ethereal tokens for us. It wouldn't be appropriate for us to enter the ethereal hall in our capacity as elders, Elder Mu said. The Inner Disciples' ethereal hall was a place for inner disciples to acquire resources and battle with one another. Under normal circumstances, elders were not allowed to enter the premises. If they entered the ethereal hall as elders to resolve the matter, it would only blow the matter up. More people would begin talking about the matter, making it harder to suppress the news. Elder Mu, please hold on for a moment. Liu Lujie quickly walked back into the main hall, and before long, he returned with more than a dozen ethereal tokens in hand. Even though Bai Ruanqing had already left the premises, the inner disciples who had led her there had not managed to find an opportunity to leave yet. They were vendors in the inner disciples' market, so they had plenty of ethereal tokens on hand. Given that this was a request from the elders, They would not dare turn down the request. Each elders quickly activated an ethereal token before immersing their consciousness into it. Similar to by ranching, they also made sure to conceal their true appearances, disguising themselves as ordinary inner disciples. Under Liu Lujie's lead, the large group swiftly arrived in the vicinity of the dueling ring. At that moment, the entire area was swamped with people. Sword chi flew all around as if it was the end of the world. Countless heads flew through the air as light fragments dissipated here and there. While Liu Lujie and the others were away, at least 800 more inner disciples had been slaughtered. In other words, so far, I Am Low Profile had already killed more than 1,000 people, which was equivalent to a tenth of the inner disciples. This was too brutal. His junchi and stamina don't seem to have been depleted too much, Liu Lujie remarked in astonishment as he looked at the center of the crowd, where I Am Low Profile was strolling calmly. He would never have believed that a cultivator could kill 1,000 of his peers without exhausting himself to death prior to this incident, but such a thing was happening right before his eyes. Liu Lujie felt that he would not be surprised by whatever I Am Low Profile pulled off at this rate. Elder Mu, you can also see that the crowd is riled up. There's nothing much we can do at the moment. Liu Lujie sighed deeply. This battle could not be stopped that easily anymore. It was not just a one-sided slaughter from I Am Low Profile, the provoked inner disciples were burning with fighting will as well. Even if Elder Mu stepped in and ordered the fight to stop, it was unlikely that the crowd would simply heed his orders. The only reason you feel that there's nothing that can be done is because you are weak. Just take a good look instead. With a displeased look on his face, Elder Mu ordered, "Elders, follow me to stop that fellow from slaughtering any more people." Yes. The 10 strongest inner disciple elders nodded before proceeding forward. Even though their appearance looked no different from ordinary inner disciples, it was obvious that they were true experts just from the sword intent they emanated. The crowd swiftly opened up a path for them. Walking right up to Zhongxian, Elder Mu waved his sword and shrouded the entire area with a sphere of sword chi. "Enough, you have already done enough today. It's about time for you to step down," Elder Mu commanded. Seeing how the new group of challengers haughtily walked in to stop the battle, Zhongxian shook his head impatiently. "Yet another bunch of hero wannabes? Do you want to fight another one-on-one? My apologies, but I really don't have that much time to waste on you all." "You." Not expecting the other party to put them down in such a manner, Elder Mu flew into a rage. He lifted the sword in his hand, intending to teach the young man before him a lesson. But all of a sudden, he felt a sharp pain along his neck. The next moment, his head slid down to the ground. Before his consciousness dissipated, he saw the heads of the elders who had gone over together with him falling to the floor as well. Chapter 1966. Indeed an inner disciple. Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong froze on the spot. Elder Mu. Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong froze on the spot. Elder Mu and the others were there to solve the matter on their behalf, but they had actually been killed as soon as they had made a move. Yet, they could be considered among the strongest people in the entire sect. Bro, don't you feel any difference fighting them at all? Do you not sense any difference in the intensity of their sword intent? Shouldn't it be obvious that they aren't ordinary disciples just from their disposition? Yet, you still killed them so easily. What made the situation even harder to accept was that Elder Mu and the others had clearly attempted to retaliate against I Am Low Profile's attack, but the outcome was the same as before, killed with a single slash. It was still understandable that a core disciple might not be his opponents, but those were true immortal realm elders. To kill 10 of them with a single slash of his sword, this was utterly ridiculous. Just how freakishly powerful was I Am Low Profile? It was laughable how he, at one point, had thought that he could possibly defeat the latter. Liu Lujie's teeth just would not stop clattering as he stared at I Am Low Profile. He could not begin to imagine just what kind of monster was hidden beneath that human-like exterior. As for I Am Low Profile, right after defeating the 10 elders, he charged forth to engage the other inner disciples. It was as if he had not been affected by the earlier encounter at all, or rather, he did not even notice that the 10 people whom he had just faced were esteemed elders of the sect. It was as if they were all small ants trying to stand against a giant. Wow, there sure are a lot of people here. Just as Liu Lujie had guessed, Zhong Xian was completely unaware that the 10 people whom he had just faced were elders of the sect. They were dressed just like the other inner disciples, and they seemed to be in their early 20s from their appearances. Not to mention, they did not seem strong at all. Of course, if it was on any other occasion, Zhong Xian would surely have been able to tell the difference. However, it was unfortunate that he was in too much of a hurry. He knew that his zhenqi was limited, so if he did not quickly end them, he might just end up losing the battle. If he lost, not only would he not receive a single sword pavilion coin, he would also lose the only 32 sword pavilion coins that he had on him. That was his entire fortune. There was no way in hell that he would allow himself to lose that. Thus, he couldn't allow them to stall for time. You want to fight me one-on-one? Don't waste my precious time. You want to have a chat with me? Spare me your nonsense. If you can at least withstand a strike from me, I can still consider giving you the privilege of fighting me in a one-on-one battle. Otherwise, spare me from those unnecessary fillerish speeches. As such, when Elder Mu and the others were defeated in a single strike, he automatically assumed that they were no different from ordinary disciples. If there was any difference, it was just that they were much more supercilious. I have already expended a third of my zhenqi. I need to speed up. Lifting his head, Zhong Xian saw that the crowd, from 800 at the very start, had grown to a humongous 5,000. With the passing of time, more and more inner disciples would surely gather there. He could not afford to waste a second. Who? His silhouette vanished into an afterimage as he sped up his movements. Even Elder Mu and the others aren't a match for him. It seems like I am low profile is a far more formidable figure than we thought. Let's hurry up and return. Otherwise, if Elder Mu throws a tantrum during our absence. Liu Lujie said. UN. Wang Jiandong nodded in agreement. The situation was clearly way out of their control. There was no meaning in them staying there anymore. But just as they were about to leave, a sharp glint bolted through the air, heading their way. Pada. Pada. Yet again, there was a sharp pain in their necks, and their heads bounced several times on the ground before coming to a stop. *T. This is already the third time. The two of them were on the verge of tears. Just what in the world did they do so wrong to deserve being decapitated 3 times within an hour? It was ridiculous. They had never suffered such a huge setback ever since they started practicing the sword. Yet, shortly after I Am Low Profile made an appearance, they had already died 3 times back to back. Those two experts felt as if they were going berserk. As their consciousness retreated from the ethereal hall and returned into the main hall, Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong found themselves awakening to a very still, heavy atmosphere. Elder Mu and the others were seated silently on the stools, not saying a word at all. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. There was an awfully long silence that left Liu Lujie feeling deeply uncomfortable. Eventually, he was unable to take it anymore, so he meekly called out, "Elder Mu." It was then that the petrified elders finally seemed to come back to life. Was I beheaded by that fellow? It seems so. How were we defeated so quickly? I didn't even have time to react. Neither did I. The 10 elders had dazed expressions on their faces, as if they had just been through an unbelievable dream. As true immortal cultivators, they had spent long years immersed in the profoundness of swordsmanship. They might not be the strongest sword practitioners within the sect, but their skills were far beyond the level of ordinary core disciples. Even if their cultivation had been suppressed to ancient sage 1 Dan, they never would have thought that they could have been defeated that easily. Yet, just a moment ago, before they could even say their piece, their heads had already rolled. Implausible. Inconceivable. Impossible. It was as if the common sense that they always lived by had suddenly failed them. This was especially so for Elder Mu. He felt so embarrassed that he wished that he could simply meld into his shadow and disappear. It was a moment ago that he had confidently declared that Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong had lost to that fellow due to their weakness. He had spoken as if everything would be settled now that he was there. But in the end, he was slaughtered before he could even finish his sentence, as if a half-assed villain. How humiliating. He had never felt so ashamed in his many years as an elder. There was another long silence in the air before an elder finally asked the golden question. What should we do now? This. Elder Mu pondered for a long while before turning to Liu Lujie and asking, What's that fellow called? I am low profile. Liu Lujie replied. Low profile? Elder Mu suddenly felt spasms in his heart. He had to clutch it tightly in order to prevent himself from fainting on the spot. A person who had caused such a huge commotion by challenging all the inner disciples and unhesitatingly killing even the elders. Low profile? Why did this term sound particularly prickly to his ears? Elder Mu stood up as he sternly commanded, Don't tell anyone that we were here. Ah! Liu Lujie was taken aback. Did this mean that not even Elder Lu and the others were going to bother about this matter either? Let's leave, Elder Mu said before walking out. In just a few moments, the 10 elders had already vanished from the residence, as if they had never been there in the first place. Senior Liu. Wang Jiandong's face was warped in utter shock. Elder Mu had no other choice. As an elder, he was supposed to resolve this matter, but he ended up getting killed instead. Given what has happened, the only thing he could do is feign ignorance. Otherwise, how is he supposed to keep his head up in the sect in the future? Liu Lujie said with a bitter smile. It was not that they did not want to bother about this matter, but there was nothing that they could do. If others learned that they had been killed by an inner disciple, they would be laughed at by their peers. On an aerial beast, one of the elders turned to the silent Elder Mu and asked, Are we really not going to interfere in that matter? Of course not, Elder Mu replied. We are heading to the Sword Gazebo to check what exactly is up with I am low profile. Sword Gazebo? That's the place where the sect controls the internal ethereal hall, right? It would indeed be possible to track down I am low profile's exact locations from there, but as inner elders, we don't have the right to access such private information, the other elder replied. If the ethereal tokens were the devices used to enter the local network, the Sword Gazebo was where the central computer and the server were located. Through the central computer, it was possible to track the exact locations of those who were in the ethereal hall. However, such information was not allowed to be accessed easily. The reason the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion had chosen to establish an ethereal hall internally was because of the benefits it brought. They wished to create an anonymous world where their disciples could interact and fight with one another regardless of their identity and standing. As such, even the sect leader would not dare access the information lightly. Otherwise, the very nature of the ethereal hall would change if the disciples felt that their anonymity on the platform was being threatened. It would go against everything that the ethereal hall stood for. I don't need his personal particulars or where he is. Elder Mu shook his head. All I need to know is his exact strength. His exact strength. As activating the ethereal token required one to drip a droplet of blood on it, it was possible for the system to detect the strength of the cultivator to a very precise degree. An elder swiftly realized what Elder Mu was up to. Are you trying to verify if he's an inner disciple? Indeed. Given I am low profile swordsmanship, I am really wondering if this is a prank pulled by a core disciple. If his cultivation hasn't reached pseudo-immortal, it means that he's truly an inner disciple. If so, there's no need for us to interfere any further in this matter, Elder Mu said. The crowd nodded in realization. If I am low profile was a core disciple, it would only be right for them as elders to intervene, or else it would be a huge blow to the inner disciples. On the other hand, if I am low profile was an inner disciple, at the very least, it would just be inner disciples losing to an inner disciple. It would be an internal affair, and it would not be too shameful. In fact, it might even be a blessing in disguise. The incredible strength displayed by I am low profile would serve as a perfect example of how powerful an inner disciple could actually be, and perhaps, it might even motivate them much more than before to push for greater heights after seeing that the sky was the limit. It did not take long for the aerial beast to arrive at the Sword Gazebo. Elder Mu placed his identity token down and said, I would like to check the strength of the cultivator who uses the nickname I am low profile. Wang. There was a flicker on the wall, and a line of words appeared, Dimension Shatterer Realm Consummation. His at Dimension Shatterer Realm Consummation? If that's the case, he really is an inner disciple. The minimum requirement for becoming a core disciple is for one's cultivation to reach pseudo-immortal. He clearly hasn't reached that mark. But when did such a formidable figure appear among the inner disciples? All 10 elders were stunned by the result before them. After witnessing I Am Low Profile's tremendous strength, they had really thought that the other party might be one of those overpowered geniuses of the core disciples. But the result reflected in the sword gazebo told them clearly that the other party was a true inner disciple. But as elders, how could they be unaware that there was such a powerful existence among the inner disciples? In Elder Bai Yi's residence, upon seeing Bai Wanqing, Bai Feng immediately rushed forward and asked, "How is it? Have you found that medicine cellar?" He had to take care of the old master, so after taking the young lady to the inner disciples' market, he had quickly rushed back to the residence. "Not yet." Bai Wanqing shook her head. Noticing that something was amiss with Bai Wanqing's current state, for some reason, she appeared to be a little subdued. Bai Feng worriedly asked, "Did something happen?" "Yes. Earlier, there was someone who issued a challenge to all of the inner disciples. When I heard of the matter, I entered the inner disciples' ethereal hall and challenged that person to a battle." Bai Wanqing quickly went through what had just happened. "You were defeated in a single move even after executing the heavy snow swordsmanship that I have imparted to you?" Bai Feng's eyes widened in shock. "That's right," Bai Wanqing replied awkwardly. "I can't really describe it, but the other party's swordsmanship made me feel as though the heavy snow swordsmanship is completely useless." "How can that be?" Bai Feng frowned. Even though the heavy snow swordsmanship is not the most powerful sword art in the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion, it's still not something that an inner disciple would be able to withstand. He pondered silent for a moment before saying, "Do you have another ethereal token? I would like to take a look myself." Chapter 1967 And They All Fell Down. Bai Wanqing shook her head. "Grandpa Feng, you wish to head in to take a look, too?" "I don't have any on hand at the moment." Bai Wanqing shook her head. "Grandpa Feng, you wish to head in to take a look, too? The heavy snow swordsmanship is profound and powerful. I find it hard to believe that someone was able to overcome it that easily," Bai Feng replied. "I reckon that he might have resorted to some kind of underhanded means. I would like to challenge him and see it for myself." As diligent as Bai Wanqing was, she was still limited by her age. Despite having reached major accomplishment in the sword art, the truth was that she had only barely scraped the surface of its true essence. Bai Feng felt that if he used the sword art personally, he should be able to defeat the person whom Bai Wanqing was talking about. Through this, he would be able to restore Bai Wanqing's faith in the sword art. His only an inner disciple. "Grandpa Feng, even though you aren't an elder, your strength is even above that of most of the elders. I don't think it would be appropriate for you to make a move on him," Bai Wanqing said awkwardly. It was already beneath her to make a move in the inner disciples' ethereal hall. If Bai Feng made a move too, regardless of whether he won or lost, it would reflect badly on him. "I'm just heading in to take a look at that fellow's swordsmanship. Depending on the situation, I might not necessarily make a move," Bai Feng replied with a smile. "Besides, I am just an old servant. Nothing's inappropriate for me." No matter how powerful Bai Feng was, he was just a servant of Elder Bai Yi. He was not restricted by the rules and regulations of the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion. Seeing that Bai Feng's mind was made up, Bai Wanqing knew that it would be hard to talk him out of the matter. She nodded and said, "All right then, I'll make preparations." Thus, together with Bai Feng, she made her way back to Liu Lujie's residence. When Liu Lujie saw the female dinosaur appearing before him moments after he had seen Elder Mu and the others off, he suddenly felt a lump in his throat. It had been so long since he felt like crying. "Why are you all walking in and out of my residence so freely? I am an inner disciple, not the owner of a bed and breakfast." Of course, there was no way that Liu Lujie would respond with a no to Bai Wanqing's request, so he could only obediently get his men to prepare an ethereal token. Soon, the entire group was back in the ethereal hall. To be honest, he did not want to return to that wretched place anymore, but under Bai Wanqing's watchful glare, he felt like he would be pushed to the ground and violated if he did not enter. Thus, with a helpless sigh, He entered the ethereal hall once more together with Wang Jiandong, and they led Bai Wanqing and Bai Feng to the dueling ring. Around 10 minutes had passed, and it seemed like yet another 1,000 inner disciples had been eliminated. This time around, the encirclement had clearly grown much smaller. No matter how furious and indignant the inner disciples were, with 2,000 of them getting eliminated, it was inevitable that some of them would start cowering away. In their eyes, I am low profile probably seemed no different from a perpetual motion machine who knew not of exhaustion. It felt like he could continue slaughtering for days on end without resting at all. This swordsmanship. After examining I am low profile's movements for a moment, Bai Feng frowned. There was only one word that he could use to describe the swordsmanship before him: basic. He could see through it with a single glance. There was no technique or skill involved at all, almost as if the other party was a child who knew no swordsmanship brandishing a blade. But for some inexplicable reason, he was able to bring forth astonishing might with such simple movements. Those who stood in his path could only end up dying helplessly. This was the first time that Bai Feng had felt so conflicted upon seeing a swordsmanship. He had no idea whether it was powerful or not. More precisely, the difference in the strength between I am low profile and his opponents was simply too great, such that it was impossible to truly put that swordsmanship to the test. It was just like how, no matter how powerful the martial art one used against a 3-year-old was, it would still be impossible to assess if one was truly powerful or not. Grandpa Feng. Bai Wanqing looked at Bai Feng. His swordsmanship is indeed formidable, but if we want to know the true extent of his abilities, I will need to test him personally. Bai Feng replied. Test him personally? Liu Lujie's eyebrows shot up. Elder Feng, there's no need for that. I fear that. What do you fear? Rest assured, I won't kill him and put you in a tough spot. Bai Feng replied with a frown. No, that's not it. I am not afraid that you will kill him but that he will kill you. That will make the situation even more awkward, Liu Lujie said with a bitter smile. Audacious. Do you know how powerful Grandpa Feng is? How could he possibly be killed? How dare you even insinuate this possibility? Bai Wanqing flew into a rage. Bai Feng might not be an elder of the sect, but his strength was far greater than that of an average elder. Such a possibility was so preposterous that it should not even be spoken of. Liu Lujie seemed to be itching for a beating. I apologize for my disrespect. Please, feel free to go ahead. Liu Lujie shook his head and sighed. Elder Mu and the others had come by earlier, but they had ended up being slaughtered. Elder Feng might be a formidable individual, but it did not seem too likely that he would be able to defeat 10 inner elders of the same cultivation realm simultaneously. However, since it did not seem like his words were going to go through, he did not want to waste his breath. After all, he could not reveal the fact that Elder Mu and the others had come by earlier. Bai Feng could not help but burst into laughter upon hearing those words. If you are worried that I will be killed, I must say that your worries are groundless. Other than the old master and a few other elders in the sect, I have never feared anyone. While he was not well known in the sect due to his humble personality, that did not mean that he was a weakling. He had been personally taught by Elder Bai Yi, and he had cultivated for over 100 years. His understanding in the way of the sword had already reached an astounding level. There was hardly anyone in the world who could scare him. Releasing his sword intent, Bai Feng began walking toward the center of the crowd with widened strides. There had never been any need for him to prove himself to others. The only reason he had gone there was to see how the other party managed to overcome the heavy snow swordsmanship. On the other hand, as Bai Feng walked toward the center of the crowd, Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong's lips twitched a little, and they hurriedly backed away and hid behind a wall. What are you two up to? Bai Wanqing frowned upon seeing the peculiar actions of those two. It's nothing much. Senior Bai, why don't you come over as well? We are able to see everything clearly with our eye of discernment anyway, so there's no need for us to stay so close to the battlefield, Liu Lujie advised nervously. He might not have suffered any physical harm, but the pain from having one's head decapitated was not something that one could ever get used to. He had no intention of letting it happen a fourth time. Cowards. To think that the Yu are the top rankers among the inner disciples, How embarrassing. Seeing through the thoughts of the two, Bai Wanqing shook her head in disdain as she continued spectating the commotion from where she was. It was hard to tell what Bai Feng had done, but the crowd that was gathered around I Am Low Profile quickly opened up a route for him to walk through. Hula. Before reaching I Am Low Profile, Bai Feng raised his sword and gathered his sword chi at the tip of his sword. With a slash of his sword, he stirred up a powerful snowstorm in the surroundings. On the receiving end of the technique, I Am Low Profile visibly narrowed his eyes a little. After which, he took a step forward and slashed his sword horizontally. Pooha! Bai Feng's head fell to the ground. Bai Wanqing was flabbergasted. Even when executing his strongest technique, Grandpa Feng was not able to withstand that I Am Low Profile's offense. She rubbed her eyes to check if she was seeing things, but the next instant, a sharp pain sliced through her neck. Her head fell to the ground as well. Even in her death, she could not believe what had just happened. She had been positioned 30 meters away from the culprit, but she had still lost her life just like that. It was no wonder Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong had chosen to hide behind the wall. It seemed like they had already guessed that such a thing would happen. As her head fell to the ground, she glanced backward and saw another 2 surges of sword chi flying past her. Pooha! Pooha! With resentful eyes, the heads of those 2 plopped to the ground as well. It seemed like hiding behind the walls did not work either. How shameless. Zhong Xian cursed beneath his breath. To be honest, he was already getting tired of eliminating those fellows. The body given to him by the ethereal hall was simply too weak. He had been trying to conserve as much energy as possible, but after facing so many opponents, he had still ended up depleting a half of his junchi. At the same time, his mind was starting to feel a little fatigued. Since he was the one who had issued the challenge, he planned to fully complete it. But there were some shameless inner disciples who had switched to another ethereal token after being killed to join the fray once more. That was ridiculous. If everyone did that, he would have to eliminate everyone at least 5 times. How was that fair? This was especially so for those 2 shameless fools who kept lurking around the perimeter. He had already killed them 3 times, but they kept going back to find an opportunity to assassinate him. Did they think that he would not notice that it was them just because they had changed their appearance? He was a sword master, for God's sake. It was the bare minimum to be able to discern cultivators by their sword intent. And that girl that was with them too. He was certain that he had eliminated her once already. Those shameless, cheating, lying lumps of dung, forget it. Taking several deep breaths, Zhong Xian calmed himself down. They might be shameless, but he was a gentleman. He was a principled person, and he would not stoop down to their level. At the very most, he would just kill them every single time they appeared. There was no need to lose his temper over this. Just that he did not have enough junchi to play around. It would not be defeating inner disciples any longer but destroying all their ethereal tokens. It seems like I'll have to end this all at once. Zhong Xian finally came to a decision. If he eliminated them one by one, they would just return with new ethereal tokens in hand. As long as there were ethereal tokens lying around, this would never come to an end. Since that was the case, there was only one way that he could win this duel. He had to end all of them at once. If he could just eliminate everyone present in a single minute, he should be able to end the duel. There are still roughly 3,000 people around. How can I end them all in a minute? It had taken him nearly half an hour to eliminate 2,000 inner disciples, and his energy had already dropped by half. If he went on as he had been, it would ultimately end in his loss. It seems like I can only use that move then. Zhong Xian gritted his teeth determinedly. He did have a move that was particularly effective at AoE mob clearing, but this move was very demanding on his junchi. Once he executed it, there was a good chance that his junchi would be completely depleted. As there were enemies constantly joining the battle, he had not dared to use the move so far. But since he had been forced into a corner, he had no other choice. Otherwise, there would be no end to the duel. I'll be going all out. Zhong Xian quickly calculated the timing a little, then without any hesitation, he threw his sword. Seeing that I Am Low Profile had suddenly released his grip on his sword, all of those around him were stunned. For a moment, they even forgot to press on with their attacks. Zhongxian quickly drove his zhenqi before tapping his finger lightly in the air. Hu! An incredibly concentrated surge of sword qi shot forth from the tip of his finger and rose into the air. Following which, it abruptly split into several thousand smaller strands of sword qi that floated quietly in the air, like floating guillotines. This move was not from the sword intent that he had just comprehended, but the fusion of the sea-severing sword, ocean cataclysm sword, and heaven desecration sword that he had comprehended back at the sword lagoon of the master-teacher continent. Previously, he had only been able to use one of them at once, but after comprehending the god's sword intent, he was able to combine the three of them together and bring forth destructive prowess that was many times greater than before. Back then, he had manipulated 108 swords simultaneously, with each of them executing a different sword art to overwhelm his opponent. However, the move that he was currently executing was even stronger than that. But that being said, it was already the very limits of his current body to control 3,000 surges of sword qi simultaneously. If it was any more than that, he could very well dissipate on the spot. Seeing the massive formation above them, the closest inner disciple felt goosebumps rising all over his body. He could not help but cry out desperately, breaking the silence in the air. He's up to something. We can't let him succeed. Quick, get. But before he could finish his piece, I Am Low Profile issued an imposing command to the thousands of sword qi in the air. Destroy them. Who? The thousands of strands of sword qi immediately plummeted from the sky. Puha! 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 3,000 cultivators and 3,000 heads fell to the ground simultaneously before dissipating into light fragments. The vast ethereal hall became emptier than it had ever been. Chapter 1968 The Details of the Battle 1:1968 The Details of the Battle 1. Grandpa Feng, how is that person's strength? Bai Wanqing asked anxiously. It had been 10 minutes since they returned from the ethereal hall, but as soon as their consciousness was brought back, Bai Feng had closed his eyes and fallen into deep thought. Seeing this, no one dared to say a word at all. Brilliant. It was truly brilliant. Bai Feng slowly opened his eyes, revealing the excited gleam within. Brilliant. Everyone's lips twitched a little. Had this old man been shocked silly from being beheaded? Liu Lujie could not help but look at Wang Jiandong as they touched their necks. Even though they knew that it was in a virtual world, being beheaded 4 times consecutively still left them feeling a little shaken. That being said, their heads had already been sliced off 4 times, but they did not feel any shred of the brilliance that Bai Feng was exclaiming about. I have cultivated the heavy snow swordsmanship for 100 years now, but I still can't help but find it an amazing work. Its speed is just one of its many strengths. What is more important is its ability to imbue one's zhenqi into a sword and control it with impeccable smoothness. This allows for the execution of seemingly inhuman moves, thus making it extremely difficult to deal with. Bai Feng looked into the air with a hint of admiration and reverence in his voice. For many years, I was convinced that the heavy snow swordsmanship is flawless. Yet, who could have known that the other party would overcome it in a single blow? That sword of his was truly ingenious. It was a breathtaking work of ingenuity. Even though Bai Feng had been killed in a single strike, he was still able to discern a sliver of the other party's swordsmanship, and that was enough for him to be immersed in it for many hours, as if a child stumbling upon a new this. The crowd blinked their eyes blankly. Bai Wanqing looked at Bai Feng uncertainly for a moment before asking, Grandpa Bai, are you not angry at all? To be slain in a single move by a minor figure who had not even reached pseudo-immortal yet, should an expert of his caliber not feel embarrassed and humiliated? I am more than grateful to see such a formidable swordsmanship. Why should I be angry? Bai Feng was slightly surprised by the question. He glanced at the 3 faces around him, and as if seeing through their thoughts, he chuckled softly. Humility, and not pride, is of the utmost importance to a cultivator. The way of the sword is vast and profound. An entire lifetime is not enough for us to fully uncover its wonders, so why should we allow such transient pride to affect our emotions? If I truly desired prestige and honor, I would have been a core elder at the very least by now. Yes. Bai Feng's wise teaching made their faces redden in shame. In terms of strength, Bai Feng was more than qualified to become a core elder. However, in order to serve Elder Bai Yi, he had stayed true to his responsibilities as a servant, not overstepping his bounds in the least. It was hard to find another person like him in the world. Grandpa Feng, you seem to have a really high opinion of I am low-profile swordsmanship. Could it be that he's even more formidable than you? Bai Wanqing asked curiously. More formidable than me? Bai Feng shook his head. I'm not even qualified to be compared with him. Alright, I have really widened my perspective with this duel, so I'll be heading back to take care of the old master. Wanqing, try to find the medicine cellar as soon as possible, following which, Bai Feng stood up and left the main hall. It did not take long for him to vanish over the horizon. On the other hand, Bai Wanqing did not think that Bai Feng would leave just like that. She had still been thinking of asking him a few more questions. Sighing deeply, she turned to Liu Lujie and the others and said, since you aren't able to defeat I am low profile, just leave him be for the time being. I need you to help me check who this person is. Then, she took out the painting once more. Right now, all the disciples are fighting with I am low profile, so it won't be too easy to look into it. Once the duel finishes, I'll start spreading the word to look for this person, Liu Lujie said as he stood up. However, Bai Wanqing frowned after hearing his words. There were at least 3,000 disciples surrounding I am low profile when we left the ethereal hall earlier. Furthermore, there are more inner disciples joining in the battle with each passing moment. It'll take too long for I am low profile to finish all of them. It was apparent that Bai Wanqing did not think that the inner disciples could win against I am low profile. Displeased by those words, Liu Lujie protested indignantly. No matter how long it takes, the inner disciples will surely persevere. We won't allow ourselves to be defeated just like that. This is our pride and dignity. I believe that as long as we push on, no matter how powerful I am low profile is, he'll eventually be worn down and killed. The final victory will be ours to claim. But just as Liu Lujie was making this impassioned speech, Wang Jiandong suddenly took out a jade token, and upon taking a look, his mouth fell open. His lips twitched a little, as if he had something to say, but he had no idea how to approach it. What's wrong? Liu Lujie asked. Senior Liu, I just received a message saying that the duel has ended. I am low profile killed the remaining 3,000 people with a single move. So, the system is currently processing the results, Wang Jiandong said. What? He killed 3,000 people with a single move? Liu Lujie nearly fell to the ground from shock. He stared at Wang Jiandong intently as he asked, are you certain? Liu Lujie was not the only one taken aback by this piece of news. Bai Wanqing seemed to be on the verge of losing her mind, too. It was understandable if a person was able to kill a person with one strike. 2 was still a logical number, and 10 was still barely acceptable. But to kill 3,000 cultivators of equal cultivation realm in a single move. Are you messing with me? The matter has already been confirmed. All of the killed inner disciples have returned to the ethereal hall to wait for the final verdict, Wang Jiandong said. As the third strongest inner disciple, he had subordinates that were loyal to him, so he did not doubt this intelligence. This. Liu Lujie's eyebrows shot up. He quickly turned to Bai Wanqing and clasped his fist. Senior Bai, the fact that everyone has been killed simultaneously means that the duel has already come to an end. All of us who have participated in the battle have to enter the ethereal hall to accept the verdict. Please pardon me for a moment. Go ahead. Knowing the rules, Bai Wanqing gestured for him to go ahead. To be honest, she could still hardly believe it. To defeat 3,000 inner disciples with a single move and achieve victory in this seemingly impossible challenge. Just who in the world was I am low profile? More importantly, after causing such a huge uproar in the sect, did he really think that he was still as low profile as he claimed to be? In the sword gazebo, Elder Mu and the others had just recovered from their shock. The revelation of I am low profile's cultivation realm showed that he was indeed an inner disciple. But for an inner disciple to kill 1,000 cultivators consecutively and even defeat them with the utmost ease, what was with that ridiculous strength of his? However, no matter how formidable he is, there's no way he can win. There are at least 10,000 inner disciples within the sect, and in order to protect their dignity, more and more people will eventually join the fray. Eventually, he will be worn out and fall in defeat. Elder Mu shook his head. Thus, no matter how long I am low profile perseveres, the only outcome that awaits him is defeat. The other elders nodded in agreement. They shared Elder Mu's opinion as well. It was difficult enough for a person to single-handedly defeat all the inner disciples, and they were even in the ethereal hall, where everyone's cultivation was equal. This was simply too difficult. No matter how powerful I am low profile was, there were simply some things that were fundamentally impossible. 1. Just as Elder Mu was thinking about this matter, the communication jade token in his hand suddenly buzzed. After looking at the content of the message, he froze on the spot. This. The duel has ended. I am low profile defeated 3,000 inner disciples in a single strike, thus signaling the end of the duel. How is this possible? You said that he killed 3,000 inner disciples in a single move? Stupefied, the elders fell into silence once more. Hoo. People were swiftly appearing in the ethereal hall one after another. Most of those who had participated in the duel only to be killed had rushed back as soon as they heard the news. They looked at the seemingly paralyzed young man sitting at the very center of the dueling ring with a complicated look in their eyes. Earlier, when that young man challenged all of them at once, they had thought that he was unbelievably arrogant, perhaps delusional even. But after going through a battle with him, they realized that the young man did wield the strength to obliterate all of the inner disciples. The duel has ended. I am low profile has defeated everyone present at the moment of challenge, and thus, has awarded all the sword pavilion coins of everyone who participated in the duel. The exchange will be conducted now. The person who was managing the dueling ring walked out and declared. I hereby announce that I am low profile has achieved victory. Is this for real? He's really won? Is there no one among the inner disciples who is a match for him? This must be the most humiliating day for all of the inner disciples. 5,000 inner disciples actually fell in defeat just like that. How did things end up like this? Hearing the outcome, a lot of people found themselves suffering severe mental breakdowns. As inner disciples of the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion, they were extremely prideful individuals. However, that pride of theirs had been shattered so easily by a single man on this very day. I don't agree with the verdict, someone amid the crowd shouted angrily. I rushed here as soon as I heard the news, and I haven't even participated in the duel yet. I don't believe that he has the ability to defeat 5,000 people single-handedly. Even if he has managed to do so, it's likely that Senior Liu Lujie and the other experts haven't made their appearance yet. Otherwise, how could that fellow possibly win so easily? Most inner disciples had rushed over upon hearing the challenge in the ethereal hall, but for various reasons, an entire half of the inner disciples were unable to make it in time. A lot of them had just entered the ethereal hall when the announcement that the duel had concluded sounded. They had not participated in the battle, yet they had to bear the shame of defeat. They could not accept such a verdict. Senior Liu Lujie has dominated the number 1 rank of the inner disciples for 7 years now. I don't believe that I am low profile would be able to win if he made a move, another person shouted in agreement. Liu Lujie had been killed before he could even reveal his identity. As such, while many people recognized him by his swordsmanship, there was no guarantee that the person who had fought back then was really Liu Lujie. These chants caused a sliver of hope to blossom in the hearts of the crowd. Could it be that I am low profile had won because Senior Liu did not make a move? Are you trying to refute the bet? The person managing the dueling ring asked. We dare not refute the results of the duel. There's no doubt that I am low profile is a formidable sword practitioner, but he only beat those who were present then. What we disagree with is the judgment that he has defeated all the inner disciples. Many of the experts of the inner disciples didn't make a move. If they participated in the battle, there's no way I am low profile could have lasted till the very end. No matter how they refuted the matter, they could not deny the fact that I am low profile had defeated 5,000 inner disciples. Since that was the case, as long as they insisted that the other party had not managed to defeat all of the inner disciples, they would at least be able to retain some of their dignity. There are 10,000 inner disciples in total, and 5,000 of you have been defeated by him. Is that not considered as a victory against all the inner disciples? Don't you think that you are trying too hard to refute the truth? The person managing the dueling ring replied calmly. He was an elder of the sect, but he was independent from the external elders, internal elders, or core elders. As such, he would only make an impartial verdict based on facts and reasons. What we are saying is that the more formidable experts among the inner disciples haven't made a move yet. They represent the pinnacle might of the inner disciples. If even they did not make a move, we can't accept the outcome of this duel to be representative of all of us, a voice shouted out angrily. How can you prove that they didn't participate? The person managing the dueling ring rebutted. I am unable to prove it, so I beseech the ethereal hall to reveal the details of the battle. Only with this will we be able to accept the outcome of this duel, the same voice cried out. Indeed. Please show the details of the battle. We want to know who participated in the battle. The rest of us just weren't able to make it in time to participate in the battle too, so we don't wish to bear the blame for the loss. I think that it's only fair that the ethereal hall reveals the details of the battle given that our reputation is on the line. What if all who participated in the battle are actually the weaker inner disciples? We are unwilling to bear the blame for their weakness. Such angry exclamations could be heard from the crowd. Chapter 1969 The details of the battle 2:1969 The details of the battle, 2. Most of those who were speaking up at this moment were those who had not participated in the battle and only made it in time to hear the outcome. To be honest, it was hard for them to believe that a single person could defeat 5,000 inner disciples within the short span of half an hour. How were they supposed to accept something as inconceivable as this out of the blue? Unless the details of the battle were revealed, no one could accept it. The person managing the dueling ring turned to the rest of the crowd and asked, "Are you certain? Can I verify if the other inner disciples are willing to accept this?" The identities of those in the ethereal hall were anonymous, but the battle details would reveal one's true identity. Of course, it would not go in depth to describe the details of the battle, the duel recording was there for this function, but just the revelation of one's real name had already infringed on the privacy of others. We are agreeable to this. Same here. We might have lost, but we want to know who he has won against. We need to know the results of this duel in order to accept it. Otherwise, it'll always remain a question in our mind. There were many cheers of agreement. Perhaps due to peer pressure, not a single person disagreed with the motion. Since there's full consensus for the matter, I will proceed with your requests. The person managing the dueling ring nodded. He turned to the person behind him and issued an instruction. The latter quickly turned around and left. A moment later, the person returned with a jade token in hand. This is the list of opponents whom I am low profile has killed in the past half hour. Please feel free to take a look. The young man said as he tossed the jade token into the air. Voila! A huge list of names appeared before everyone's eyes. Look! Senior Liu Lujie is at the very top, someone among the crowd shouted. Everyone quickly turned their gazes over, only to see a glaring name at the very top, Liu Lujie, 4 times. This means that Senior Liu has been here before. Just that, what does the 4 times behind mean? Another person amid the crowd asked. 4 times refers to the number of times he has been killed. Most probably, he was indignant after dying once, so he returned with another ethereal token in another identity, only to be killed again. In the end, he was killed 4 times in total, the manager of the dueling ring replied nonchalantly. He was killed 4 times consecutively? The heck? Doesn't he feel shameful at all? That's not shameful anymore. It's more like he has a complete lack of shame. Wait a moment, Senior Wang Jiandong has been killed 4 times too? Many faces amid the crowd reddened in embarrassment. They had been saying that Liu Lujie did not participate in the duel, and being proved wrong the very next moment left them feeling as if they had been smacked in the face. It was on the grounds that the number 1 Liu Lujie had not been here that they insisted that it was unfair to claim that I am low profile had won against all of the inner disciples. Who could have known that the other party had actually come again and again even after being killed? What a shameful act this was. Who is Bai Wanqing? I don't recall seeing this name among the inner disciples before. But it seems like she has been killed 2 times over the course of the duel, someone among the crowd said. Her name sounds incredibly familiar. Isn't she Elder Bai Yi's granddaughter? You know, that core disciple. Wait a moment, you are telling me that a core disciple snuck into our ethereal hall to challenge I am low profile, and she ended up being killed twice? Yet another wave of commotion was raised among the crowd. Just a moment ago, they had thought that it was shameful for Liu Lujie to be killed 4 times in the duel, but who could have thought that a core disciple would actually sneak into a duel among inner disciples, even get killed twice? There's another unfamiliar name over there. Bai Feng. I don't think I have heard of that name. Does any one of you know this person before? I have heard of Bai Feng. His elder Bai Yi's servant. Even though he isn't an elder, in terms of strength, he's far stronger than most core elders. He's even stronger than most core elders, but he still ended up getting killed here. As the inner disciples looked down the list, a lot of them looked as if they were on the verge of a mental breakdown. They could understand Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong getting killed 4 times. After all, the reputation of the inner disciples was at stake, so it was understandable for them to be a bit more shameless at a moment like that. However, even a core disciple was killed twice, and someone as powerful as a core elder was killed once. Wasn't this getting a little out of hand? It was as if some powerhouses had snuck into this little party of theirs. Given the huge commotion, why did none of the inner elders come by to resolve this matter? Indeed. No matter how slow the information network of the elders is, half an hour should be more than enough for them to learn of the matter. The same doubt emerged in everyone's minds. Even core disciples had gotten involved in this battle, only to be killed in the end. Why were the inner elders not intervening in something as huge as this? Wait a moment, there are still names below, someone suddenly shouted out, and the crowd turned their gazes over. At the very bottom of the list, several more names were slowly appearing. Mu Xian, Huang Yu, Zhong Lingbo, Lu Yun. If I recall correctly, Mu Xian is Elder Mu's full name, isn't it? Huang Yu is the name of the elder in charge of our peak. Zhong Lingbo is the inner elder who has been teaching us. In an instant, everyone's face turned livid from sheer frustration. They felt like their hearts were going to burst from how stifled it was becoming. I thought that it was weird that none of the elders intervened in this issue, but to think that they hid as inner disciples to challenge I am low profile too. Yet, they still ended up getting killed. They were the ones who taught us swordsmanship, but they were defeated. What the hell? How monstrously powerful is I am low profile? Everyone was really on the verge of losing their mind. This was especially so for the inner disciples who demanded to view the battle details earlier. They really wished to slap themselves to death. They had thought that this revelation would restore some of their reputation, but it ended up doing the contrary. It was their duel, but they had ended up bringing core disciples and even their own elders to fight on their behalf. It would have been one thing if they won, but they had actually lost. It was just like a child challenging the kindergarten he was in, but instead of mediating in the duel, the teachers and adults ganged up with the other children against the child, only to end up being beaten up themselves. How humiliating. There was nowhere they could put their face anymore. They really should not have asked for the details of the battle. Now, they felt like they were ready to wither from embarrassment. Meanwhile, Zhong Xian was also listening to the conversation among the crowd, and he was browsing through the battle details. He was flabbergasted by what he saw. When did that core disciple and those elders appear before him? Why did he not notice their presence at all? Logically speaking, if those people had made a move, he should have noticed it. But in the half an hour that he had been battling, everyone had pretty much been ended in a single slash. He did not feel much resistance at all. Oh well, it doesn't matter. As long as I managed to earn a decent sum, everything is fine. Unable to figure it out, Zhong Xian decided to simply stop thinking about it altogether. Instead, he turned to look at his ethereal card. He had killed 5,000 people over the course of the duel, and under the rules of the duel, the sword pavilion coins that they had with them would have to go to him. Since that was the case, he should have made a killing with this. With trembling fingers, he tapped on the ethereal card. A series of number quickly appeared on top of it. 283,764. I earned 280,000 sword pavilion coins. Zhongxian nearly burst out laughing like a maniac. Given that he had killed 5,000 people, that would average out to around 50 sword pavilion coins for each kill he made. In any case, he had half of the total fortune of the inner disciples with him now. If he used this money to buy pills, he should be able to tame the Dongshu gourd easily. Farewell. Seeing that his body was so depleted that it was on the verge of dissipating at any moment, Zhongxian quickly walked over to the receptionist to buy a couple of standard immortal pills before finally leaving the ethereal hall. Since he had already acquired what he wanted, there was no need to dawdle in there anymore. Returning to his room, he took out the pills before releasing the Dongshu gourd once more. Here are 10 standard immortal pills. Acknowledge me as your master, and I'll give them to you. Zhongxian uncorked the jade bottle, allowing a whiff of concentrated spiritual energy to flow out. This left the Dongshu gourd feeling deeply tempted. Why? Are you going to renege on your words? Zhongxian looked at the Dongshu gourd and smiled. Ahahaha, of course my words count. It's nothing for me to acknowledge you as my master. However, you must promise to give me ample medicine and treasures so that I can recover to my full strength, the Dongshu gourd said with a shake of its bottom. That's a given, Zhongxian replied. A small droplet of liquid melted from the Dongshu gourd's exterior before flying right into Zhongxian's glabella. Wang. Zhongxian sealed the contract, and the next moment, his consciousness was already linked up with the Dongshu gourd. Even without opening their mouths, they were also able to communicate with one another telepathically. Just what in the world are you? However, despite their telepathic communication, Zhongxian still sensed a barrier between him and the Dongshu gourd. It was hard to describe what kind of feeling it was, but if he really had to put it into words, it felt like the Dongshu gourd was an egg. He was able to communicate what was outside, but he could not peer through the shell to see what lay inside. Didn't I tell you that already? I am a legendary beast who once ruled over the lands, the Dongshu gourd replied proudly. Stop bragging. All right, here are your pills. Seeing how the Dongshu gourd was only able to repeat the same few words again and again, Zhongxian was rendered speechless. With a helpless sigh, he tossed the standard immortal pills over to the other party. Opening its mouth, the Dongshu gourd swallowed all the pills in a single mouthful. Following which, it looked at Zhongxian with a pitiful look as it whimpered, I still want more. Give me more. More. All right, I'll get more for you. Zhongxian replied in resignation. Since he had plenty of money, it was not that big a deal. Thus, he returned to the ethereal hall and purchased another 90 standard immortal pills, which he tossed to the Dongshu gourd so that the latter could slowly work its way through them. Meanwhile, he sat down quietly by the side and began pondering over what had just happened. To be honest, he had benefited a lot from the earlier battle against the 5,000 inner disciples. It had allowed him to reinforce his understanding of swordsmanship and sharpen his control over his strength. He tried driving his zhenqi a little, and he could immediately feel that the bottleneck limiting him before loosening up. He was ready to push for a breakthrough to pseudo-immortal at any moment. To think that practicing my swordsmanship in the ethereal hall would be useful to my cultivation too, Zhongxian thought in excitement. Normally, considering that he had only achieved a breakthrough to Dimension Shatterer realm consummation a few hours prior, it should have taken several days for him to reinforce his cultivation even with the Heaven's Path divine art. However, after going through the earlier battle, he managed to condense his zhenqi to the limits, and he was able to control it freely. Just like that, the pseudo-immortal realm, which should have been a long distance away, was suddenly within reach. As long as he found a suitable cultivation technique, he would be able to push for a breakthrough to the pseudo-immortal realm. Only after achieving a breakthrough to the pseudo-immortal realm is one able to become a core disciple. The cultivation techniques in the inner disciple's library only went up to the pseudo-immortal realm. If an inner disciple wanted to push for a breakthrough to pseudo-immortal, they would have to consult an elder to find the corresponding book that they required. Dan Xiaotian is currently only at Ancient Sage 1 Dan consummation. He's simply too far away from reaching the pseudo-immortal realm, As a low-profile and humble individual, Zhongxian was unwilling to reveal his identity and cultivation. Thus, he could only entrust the heavy responsibility of becoming a core disciple to his 10th direct disciple. However, his student was only entrust the heavy responsibility of becoming a core disciple to his 10th direct disciple. However, his student was even if Dan Xiaotian cultivated a simplified version of the Heaven's Path divine art and had plenty of resources to squander, it would still take at least 2 months for him before he was ready to push for a breakthrough to the pseudo-immortal realm. Otherwise, if he advanced too fast, his cultivation would be shaky. That would adversely affect the future progression of his cultivation. He could not possibly compromise his students for his own needs. Other than approaching an elder for a cultivation technique, there's another way for one to become a core disciple, and that's the Valley of Falling Rain. Many inner disciples who seek to make a breakthrough head there as there are many insights on advancing to the pseudo-immortal realm. Since Zhongxian was unable to count on his disciple, he would just have to rely on himself. He could not help but remember a book that he had read previously in the inner disciples' library, and his eyes lit up in excitement. Even if Dan Xiaotian did reach Dimension Shatterer realm consummation, it was hard to say whether he would be able to gather enough pseudo-immortal realm manuals required for him to compile a complete Heaven's Path divine art. On the other hand, the Valley of Falling Rain was a popular place for inner disciples to achieve a breakthrough, and those who successfully made a breakthrough there would inscribe their own experience and insights there. As such, it had become a treasure trove of wisdom. While those insights and experiences were not cultivation techniques, if he could compile enough of them, he should still be able to push for a breakthrough to the pseudo-immortal realm. It was fortunate that his current cultivation realm tallied with the inner disciples. This allowed him to move around openly by blending in with the inner disciples without anyone doubting his identity. I should head to the Valley of Falling Rain to take a look. With that thought in mind, Zhongxian stepped out of his room. Young master. At this moment, Cao Chengli had finished his business with the other 300 Jin, female disciple and returned to the residence. The intense battle that he had just been through caused his presence to feel a little withered. From the looks of it, the female disciple was no weakling at all. Despite Cao Chengli's remarkable skills from his many years of experience and his superb stamina, the clash still left him severely weakened. Most likely, he would have to rest for quite a long time before making a comeback. Zhongxian looked around the residence, but he was unable to find his disciple. Thus, he turned to Cao Chengli and asked, "Where's Dan Xiaotian?" Cao Chengli quickly bowed slightly before responding to Zhongxian's question. The inner disciples have been gathered for an urgent meeting, and the young master has already headed over there. 300 Jin equals 150 kilograms. Chapter 1970. Find out who I am. Low profile is. They have been gathered for an urgent meeting? Zhongxian asked doubtfully. It seems like some fool challenged all the inner disciples at once, and that has left the elders extremely infuriated. They are pushing the inner disciples to investigate the matter and catch the culprit, Cao Chengli replied. While he was battling with 300 Jin, a subordinate had reported this matter to her through the door. As such, he still knew a thing or two about this matter. Fool. Zhongxian's eyebrows shot up. You are the one who is a fool. Your entire family are fools. It's just a bet. Do you really need to go so far as to hold an urgent meeting just to apprehend me? It's fortunate that I had the foresight to change my name in advance. Otherwise, if they got me, I'd be in deep trouble. With his comprehension of swordsmanship, it was no exaggeration to say that he was invincible among those of the same cultivation realm. However, it was unfortunate that his cultivation was still too weak. Previously, when he heard from one of the inner disciples that it was possible to earn money so easily, greed had gotten the better of him for a moment, and he had ended up getting too engrossed in the fight. If they uncovered his identity, it might lead to a great deal of trouble and danger. Currently, he was not completely confident in protecting himself against true immortals or even high immortals, so he could not allow his true identity to be revealed. What have you heard so far? Is there any news on where the person who challenged the inner disciples lives or who he is? Zhongxian asked with a nonchalant look on his face. So far, The only thing I got is that the person is called I am low profile. Seriously, what an eccentric name that is. He calls himself low profile when there's no one as boastful as him in the world. As for who he is and where he is, there's still no updates on that at the moment. Cao Chengli replied with a shake of his head. Seeing that his true identity had not been compromised so far, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief in his mind. He lowered his head contemplatively for a moment before asking Cao Chengli, "Do you know where the urgent meeting is held?" "It's held at the sparring field located at the top of the mountain," Cao Chengli replied. "Got it." Zhongxian nodded as he slowly walked over to Cao Chengli. "Pa." Clutching the back of his head, Cao Chengli was shocked. "Young master, why did you hit me?" That strike was so powerful that he felt his teeth loosening from his gums. "I answered what you asked me without hiding anything at all, and my news was timely this time as well. What did I do wrong to warrant this beating? You stepped into the residence with your left foot instead of your right. I don't like it." Zhongxian threw those words at Cao Chengli before walking away coldly. "He struck me just because I entered the residence with my left foot." Cao Chengli's eyes widened in bewilderment. What kind of nonsensical rule was this? Was the young master experiencing his andropause early? Otherwise, why would he make up such a ridiculous rule? Jot it down, jot it down. I must make sure to remember it, Cao Chengli murmured to himself as he patted his heart to console his wounded soul. After leaving the residence, Zhongxian did not head to the Valley of Falling Rain but the mountain peak where the sparring field was located. He had to find out how the elders intended to find him and how much they had found out so that he could prepare countermeasures. Otherwise, it would be extremely dangerous if he did not even know when the other party was already onto him. Being low profile is the most important thing in the world. I must make sure to never act as I did earlier in the future. Zhongxian sighed deeply in regret. It was indeed exhilarating for him to defeat so many people at once, but the implications sure were troublesome. If they traced the matter back to him, he would be a goner. After acting so prudently all his life, why did he give in to recklessness this time? Seated at the very center of the Elder Council was First Elder He Tian, and the other elders who sat by his side carried imposing presences that weighed down on those before them. At the bottommost of the council was Elder Mu, who managed the inner disciples. Elder Mu was no weakling, but he paled in comparison to the elders who sat the topmost region. Even from a distance away, he could feel immense pressure crushing down on him, causing cold sweat to form all around his forehead. At this moment, another elder walked into the hall and took his seat. After which, he asked, "Elder He, may I know the reason you have gathered us so urgently? It looks like everyone is here." "Elder Mu, I'll be troubling you to relay what you said earlier to the council once more." Elder He Tian looked at Elder Mu and nodded. "Yes." Elder Mu quickly rose to his feet and said, "Greetings, fellow members of the council. I am Elder Mu Xian of the Inner Disciples section. During the previous Elder Council, Elder He instructed all of us to search for the genius who comprehended the God's sword intent. Shortly after the announcement, a formidable sword practitioner appeared among the Inner Disciples. We suspect that the person might be the genius Elder He talked about." "Oh, on what basis are you presuming that?" an elder in the council asked with a frown. The God's sword intent was viewed to be the very zenith of swordsmanship across the entire Forsaken continent. Even if anyone comprehended it, they should be from the core disciples at the very minimum. It did not seem too likely for it to be an inner disciple. In the Inner Disciples' ethereal hall, he issued a challenge to all of the inner disciples, and he slew 5,000 of them within half an hour. Elder Mu swiftly recounted the matter that had just happened. After hearing that the person had slain 3,000 inner disciples with a single move and eventually achieved victory, intense discussion immediately broke out among the Elder Council. Not long ago, Elder He had said that someone had comprehended the God's sword intent, and then such a figure appeared and caused such a huge uproar. Could they be the same person? If that was really the case, that incident would not be a mockery to the inner disciples. On the contrary, they might even be viewed in reverence for such a powerful figure appearing from their ranks. Losing to a person who had comprehended the same divine swordsmanship as the founder was not an embarrassment but an honor. He eliminated 5,000 fellow inner disciples in the ethereal hall within half an hour. Are you certain? Some of the elders stood up as they questioned the authenticity of Elder Mu's statement. This matter was simply too inconceivable. It was a fixed rule that all of those who entered the ethereal hall would be of the same cultivation realm. Putting aside whether it was possible to slay 5,000 people alone or not, the fact that he was able to pull it off within half an hour was already an absurd notion. Was it possible for someone to be so much more powerful than his peers on the basis of his skills alone? I have the video of the fight here, Elder Mu said as he presented a record crystal to the Elder Council. The Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion's ethereal hall also had a video recording function, similar to the ethereal halls outside too. Cultivators could purchase the video recordings at a set price. Knowing that this matter was of grave importance, Elder Mu had made sure to purchase the recording of the battle between I Am Low Profile and the inner disciples beforehand. With a tap of his finger, the crystal immediately reflected the details of the earlier battle. Due to time constraints, he skipped the earlier segments of the battle to show the final move, where countless strands of sword chi each morphed into a sword art, decapitating the heads of 3,000 cultivators in a flash. This sight caused everyone's eyebrows to shoot up in astonishment. Even they would be unable to pull off a move of such imposing might once they suppressed their cultivation to ancient sage One Dan, yet, that fellow was able to pull it off so easily. Just how deep was his comprehension of swordsmanship? That swordsmanship isn't our founder's god's sword intent though. Nevertheless, the fact that he's able to cultivate his swordsmanship to such a level likely means that he's the man we are searching for, the elder who spoke earlier remarked. Even though he found it bizarre that someone who had achieved such a formidable level of swordsmanship was still only an inner disciple, all of the evidence pointed in the same direction. That's what I thought as well. Elder, he nodded in agreement. Thus, I would like to confirm I Am Low Profile's identity and trace his location, but such actions are strictly prohibited by the sect rules. It would undermine the significance of the ethereal hall, the elder earlier replied with a frown. The ethereal hall was incapable of identifying a person directly. Even for the battle details that were reflected previously, that was achieved through cross-referencing the blood droplet used to activate the ethereal token together with the inner disciple's identity token. An exception was made earlier because the people presumed to be involved in the duel had expressly consented to having their identities revealed, but this was not the case for I Am Low Profile. As such, this matter had to be viewed separately. I understand this as well. Thus, I gathered all of you here to discuss this matter. Elder, he said. This is an extenuating circumstance. If the experts of the Hall of Gods find him earlier than we do, it might lead to unnecessary complications. As someone who has comprehended the God's sword intent, if he's allowed to grow, he will eventually obtain the strength to challenge the authority of the gods. The experts of the Hall of Gods won't allow for that. It's likely that they will make a move on him in advance. Such matters have occurred in history before. Many talented geniuses have been killed by the Hall of Gods because their sects failed to protect them. The atmosphere in the room grew a little heavy following his speech. Elder Mu's body stiffened from the pressure, and he did not dare breathe loudly. His standing was such that he was not privy to the secrets of the Forsaken Continent. However, from the discussion in the council, he was able to figure out the situation. He immediately understood the severity of this matter and why this issue had to be kept confidential by any means. Otherwise, a disaster might really strike the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion. An elder stood up and proposed, I suggest that we liaise with the sect leader and have him make the decision on this matter. I think this is the safest move we can make. Indeed. Such a major decision requires the judgment of the sect leader. Another person echoed in agreement. I have already informed the sect leader of the matter, and this was his response. Elder, he replied as he took out a communication jade token and flashed it to the crowd. There were 7 words on the token, deal with it as you deem fit. This. Since the sect leader has already made such a call, let's look into that person's identity and location them. This is so that we can offer him greater protection from the Hall of Gods. Like the first elder said, This is a special circumstance, and we need to deal with it accordingly. Since the sect leader had entrusted the decision to them, the other elders quickly nodded in agreement. All right, let's head to the sword gazebo. Seeing that there was a majority agreement in the council over this issue, Elder He stood up and walked out of the room. The crowd also rose to their feet, and they swiftly made their way over to the sword gazebo. As for Elder Mu, due to his inability to fly, Elder He wrapped him within a surge of his junchi and pulled him along with the group. Since that genius was likely to be among the inner disciples, it would be helpful for Elder Mu to be with them as well. They quickly arrived at the sword gazebo. Without any hesitation, the elders quickly passed their identity tokens over and placed them on the wall. After which, Elder He commanded, "Reveal I Am Low Profile's identity and exact location." Wang. There was a slight buzz as light flickered on the wall for a moment. However, nothing appeared. What's going on? Elder He frowned. With so many elders together with them, they should have had the authority to uncover I Am Low Profile's identity and location. Why was nothing appearing at all? It could be because he isn't in the ethereal hall at the moment, that's why nothing is reflected on the wall, someone said from afar. Everyone quickly turned their heads around, and they saw an elder descending toward them. He was none other than the leader of the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion, Sect Leader Han. He had finally returned. Paying respects to the sect leader, the elders quickly bowed respectfully. After which, Elder He looked over and asked, "Sect Leader Han, you mentioned earlier that the person in question is not in the ethereal hall. What does that mean?" Most of them had never used the sword gazebo to find the identity and location of a person before, so they were unaware of the details surrounding it. The ethereal hall uses one's consciousness to determine the location of the body. If the consciousness is not within the ethereal hall, how can you check the person's whereabouts? Sect Leader Han replied. Elder He and the others widened their eyes in realization. Previously, the reason Elder Mu had been able to check I Am Low Profile's cultivation without any problem was because the latter had still been fighting with the other inner disciples. However, now that I Am Low Profile was no longer in there, it made sense for the search to fail. Looking at the frustrated faces around him, Sect Leader Han chuckled softly before saying, "Don't worry, we just have to wait here patiently. As long as I Am Low Profile enters the ethereal hall once more, we'll easily be able to uncover his position." Hearing those words, the other elders quietly nodded. Given the huge fuss that the other party had caused, as well as the humongous wealth that he had earned through the duel, it was just a matter of time before he appeared in the ethereal hall once more. As long as they bided their time, they would eventually be able to catch him. Since that's the case, we'll just stay here for the time being to keep a lookout. Elder Mu, since this matter concerns the inner disciples, you should remain here. Elder He instructed. Yes. Elder Mu quickly nodded. Just like that, the strongest experts of the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion ended up waiting quietly at the sword gazebo, waiting for Zhongxian to enter the ethereal hall once more. Chapter 1971 It's him. It's him. 1971 It's him. It's him. Meanwhile, the person in question, Zhongxian, was unaware that the top experts of the sect were on a stakeout for him. He was rushing all the way up to the sparring field on the mountain peak. A huge crowd had already gathered around the area. All 10,000 or so inner disciples had halted their cultivation and rushed over as soon as they received the news. Following the crowd, Zhongxian found a corner and hid himself. There were many people around the area, so no one would really notice an ordinary person like him. I believe that most of you should have guessed why I have gathered all of you here. There was an old man at the very center of the crowd. His voice echoed loudly in everyone's ears. He was the second in charge of the inner disciples section, Elder Huang Yu. Upon hearing the elder's words, all the inner disciples lowered their heads in embarrassment. Just a moment before being gathered, they had been defeated by an individual in the ethereal hall. Even the slowest of minds could easily understand what was going on. This is the first time that something like this has happened in the long history of the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion. I don't know which of you is I Am Low Profile, but the fact that he was able to triumph over 5,000 people alone is huge for the sect. He's worthy of praise. As for the rest of you, despite 5,000 of you ganging up on a single person, you couldn't even kill him? Let me ask you this, what have you been learning in the sect over the years? Have you just been idling your time away? Elder Huang Yu's face was completely nonchalant, which made it hard to read whether he was angry or excited. The crowd was not too sure what they should expect from him. However, his words caused all of them to lower their heads in embarrassment. It was indeed a humiliation that they were unable to defeat a single person. There was no way that they could argue their out of this matter. Just that. If we recall correctly, Elder Huang Yu, you also snuck there and ended up being killed. Is it really fine for you lecture us like this? Of course, none of the inner disciples dared say those words out loud. It's true that we are not a match for I am low profile, but given how formidable he is there a chance that he's a core disciple in disguise? One of the inner disciples asked. As soon as this question was asked, it immediately sparked a lot of nods of agreement from the crowd. As fellow inner disciples, they knew each other's standards. If someone who was slightly stronger than that appeared, it would still be believable to them. But I am low profile had far exceeded that level. As such, this got them thinking. Knowing that the inner disciples would pose such a question, Huang Yu calmly waved his hand. Elder Mu and the rest of us paid a visit to the sword gazebo to check on the matter, and his strength is indeed only at Dimension Shatterer realm consummation. This is the result of our investigation. 1. A recording surfaced in the air. It showed the sight of the 10 elders heading toward a wall to check on I am low profile strength. Very soon, the wall reflected a result corroborating what Elder Mu had said. He really is a Dimension Shatterer realm consummation cultivator. An inner disciple, just like us. Is it really possible for inner disciples to be this powerful? I can't believe that skills can make one so much more powerful than others. This sight vanquished any doubts that I am low profile might not be an inner disciple. What else do you have to say for yourselves? After playing the recording, Elder Huang Yu looked at the inner disciples around him coldly. As soon as you think that you are unable to defeat him, you think that he's a core disciple. Have you tried searching within you for the reason behind your defeat? Before the crowd could even answer, his aura grew even sharper and more imposing, leaving the crowd feeling a little suffocated. Why do you think that I am low profile was able to become so much more powerful than the rest of you? That's because, just like his nickname, he has humbly trained harder than any of you without fussing over transient things like fame and honor. He has never wasted his time flaunting his skills in public or engaging in useless politics. All that was in his heart was cultivation, and cultivation. It's by shedding more blood, sweat, and tears than any single one else of you that he managed to reach his current level. What about the rest of you? Elder Huang Yu's voice gradually got louder with every word he spoke. You are obsessed with honor and glory. Fighting can improve your skills, but you content yourselves with picking weaker opponents and staying within what you are used to so that you can win your duels. You view loss to be something more frightening than remaining stagnant. With such mindsets, how can you possibly cultivate the best swordsmanship in the world? How can you become real experts? Those words struck a chord in everyone's heart. Realizing how much time they had wasted on pursuing honor and glory among themselves, they lowered their heads in shame. On the other hand, Zhong Xian was rendered speechless by the high praise being heaped on him. The reason he had never appeared in public or engaged in useless politics was because this was only his first day at the sect. He could not have done it even if he wanted to. That being said, the thing about him shedding a lot more blood, sweat, and tears in order to reach his current level was indeed true. Don't be content with what you already have. Don't restrict yourself to what you already know. Don't blame others when you find yourself outmatched. While you might not be as talented as the other party, you aren't even close to being as hardworking as he is. Elder Huang Yu's voice reverberated across the crowd. From this day forth, I hope that you can throw away all the needless baggage weighing you down and make the inner disciples sector stronger than ever. Are you able to do it? Do you have the confidence to do it? Yes, Elder Huang. We have the confidence to do it. With fists that were tightly clenched, the crowd roared in agreement. Seeing the high morale among the crowd, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. He had thought that the elders were going to investigate his identity, so he had come running over out of fright, but in the end, they were just using him as an antagonist in order to spark everyone's motivation. That's all I'm going to say today. I have heard your response, and I'm looking forward to what you can achieve. Elder Huang Yu replied. One last thing. Whoever I am low profile is, I hope that you can take the initiative to look for me. All right, you are all dismissed. Seeing that his identity had not been compromised yet, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. He left his hiding spot, and just as he was going to make his way over to the Valley of Falling Rain, an anxious voice suddenly sounded behind him. It's him. It's him. This voice was extremely abrupt and urgent, such that it caught everyone's attention. Zhongxian also turned his head over, only to feel cold sweat raining down his body. He nearly fainted in that instant. The person who had shouted out loud was currently pointing agitatedly at him, and everyone's eyes were centered on him. The heck? Zhongxian felt goosebumps rising all over his body. Surely, he would not be recognized just like that, right? If that was the case, how was he going to continue being low profile? More importantly, once his identity was confirmed, it was likely that he would not have time to cultivate anymore. Challengers would come buzzing to him like incessant flies, hoping to fight him again and again. If it was possible for anyone to die out of annoyance, that would probably be the way. After all, who would not want to make a name for themselves? If they could defeat him, who was reputed to have defeated 5,000 cultivators, would that not immediately place them higher than him? No, it's not me. Your eyes are bad, and you have the wrong person, Zhongxian replied as he turned around and bolted off. While everyone was still in a daze over what was going on, Zhongxian was already sprinting off like an unbridled horse, nearly disappearing in an instant. Don't run. The inner disciple who had shouted earlier was stunned by how fast Zhongxian's response was. He was just about to pursue the other party when he suddenly felt immense pressure crushing down on him. At some point in time, Elder Huang had already arrived by his side and asked, "You mentioned that it's him. Who is he?" "He's a fake medicine peddler." No, I mean real medicine peddler. The inner disciple quickly replied with a bow. Elder Huang Yu's eyelids twitched. If he could, he would have slapped this fellow into the bottom of the ocean. It was just a moment ago that he was talking about I am low profile when this fellow shouted, "It's him." His spirits were raised as he thought that he had finally found that powerful sword practitioner, but it turned out to be just a medicine peddler. Do you really have to get so agitated upon finding a medicine peddler? Realizing that Elder Huang Yu's face was getting more and more livid by the second, the inner disciple quickly clarified, "This is a request from Senior Bai Wanqing. I've been unable to find him, so I couldn't contain my excitement when I finally saw him once more." Even though this inner disciple had not been located closest to Zhongxian at the inner disciple's market back then, he had still managed to catch a good look at the latter's appearance during his encounter with Bai Wanqing. It was just that Zhongxian had not really been paying much attention to those present in the market then, so he did not recognize this inner disciple. Bai Wanqing is looking for him? Elder Huang Yu frowned. Even as an elder, he had also heard many things about Bai Wanqing. Why would Elder Bai Yi's granddaughter look for a mere inner disciple? It seems like the medicine that she bought from him was still rather effective, so she wanted to buy a bit more, the inner disciple replied. I see. Go on and find him then. Don't get on Bai Wanqing's bad side. Elder Huang Yu waved his hand helplessly. Since the other party was not I am low profile, he also lost his interest in pursuing this matter any further. Knowing that there was no time to inform Liu Lujie and the others, the inner disciple immediately dashed down the mountain to pursue Zhongxian. That was a close one. After running for some time, Zhongxian glanced backward and saw that no one was on his tail anymore before finally coming to a halt. With a deep sigh, he rubbed his forehead in distress. He just wanted to be an ordinary man living an ordinary life. Why was it so difficult? It's not as if I asked to be born so outstanding. Anyway, if someone was able to recognize me, that means that my current identity has already been compromised. He did not know how he had been revealed, but as long as he refused to admit it and did not display his true strength, the other party should not be able to prove that he was indeed I am low profile. I have to destroy the ethereal token. If he did not destroy it, someone might just match his ethereal token to the records, and that would be concrete evidence of his identity. By then, there would be nothing that he could say that would salvage the situation. It's fortunate that the Sword Pavilion coins that I've earned are stored inside the untraceable ethereal card, so I don't need to rely on the ethereal token to withdraw my wealth, Zhong Xian thought as he took out his I am low-profile ethereal token and crushed it. It was not uncommon for cultivators to be killed in the ethereal hall, so it was common sense to place one's wealth in an ethereal card instead. This way, they would at least be able to retrieve their wealth even after their ethereal token had been deactivated. After all that was done, Zhong Xian was finally able to relax a little. It was at this moment that the person who had pointed him out caught up with him. Zhong Xian looked behind that person, but strangely enough, there was no one following him. This was both relieving and bewildering at the same time. Since this fellow had already pointed him out as I am low profile, it would have made sense for Elder Huang Yu and the others to pursue him too, right? Why did this fellow come alone then? Were they afraid of scaring him or something? Well, no matter what plans they had in store, he just had to deny everything. He had already crushed the ethereal token anyway. There was no way they could identify him. Brother, you sure run fast. Upon catching up with Zhong Xian, the inner disciple lowered his body and panted loudly from exhaustion. While Zhong Xian had intentionally slowed himself down a lot to prevent anyone from noticing any anomalies with him, it was still not a speed that anyone could easily catch up with. It's fortunate that I was the first one to recognize and catch you. Ha ha ha, I have really struck gold this time. Despite his exhaustion, the inner disciple looked at Zhong Xian with eyes reminiscent of a treasure hunter staring at a treasure. Recognize me? Don't spout nonsense. There's no way I could be that incomparably handsome and hopelessly valiant I am low profile. He's like a brilliant sun in the sky, whereas I am nothing more than an ordinary inner disciple, not even worth a mention at all. So, don't start spouting nonsense. Someone will die because of that. Zhong Xian immediately waved his hand defensively. I am low profile? What the heck are you talking about? The inner disciple was stunned by Zhong Xian's words. Chapter 1972 I must marry him, ah? Zhong Xian's body froze on the spot. Then why in the world are you chasing me? If not because you recognized I am low profile, why did you sprint after me so anxiously? You even scared me into crushing my ethereal token. You know, didn't you sell a bottle of recovery medicine to Senior by ranching a while ago? She ordered us to look for you, or else she will give us a severe pummeling. Look at these bruises all over my body. They were all inflicted by her. If I didn't find you soon, she might have tortured us to death. The inner disciple pointed all over his body and cried. Taking a closer look, Zhong Xian noticed that the inner disciple was indeed wounded all over, and he nearly burst into tears, too. You should have said it earlier if that was the case. Do you know how many years you have shaved off my life from the earlier shock? I even crushed my ethereal token. That's 20 Sword Pavilion coins, you know. It all turned out to be an empty scare. It's fortunate that I didn't lose anything else other than that, or else I might just strangle you alive. Why is she looking for me? Zhong Xian asked. I'm not too sure. It seems like your recovery medicine is effective, so she wishes to buy a few more bottles from you, the inner disciple said. She wishes to buy more medicine from me? Finally making sense of the situation, Zhong Xian heaved another sigh of relief. Everything was fine as long as his identity as I am low profile was not compromised. As for the recovery medicine that he sold, of course it was effective. Otherwise, it could not have healed him so quickly either. Indeed. The inner disciple nodded. I'll have to trouble you to visit Senior Liu Lujie with me. He's the only one who is able to contact Senior Bai. Zhong Xian's initial thought was to turn the inner disciple down. After all, he felt that this matter would just be a load of trouble. However, an idea suddenly came to his mind, and he asked, if I recall correctly, Senior Bai Wanqing is the granddaughter of Elder Bai Yi, right? She has quite a high standing among the core disciples too, doesn't she? The news concerning that female dinosaur had reached even his ears. Possessing both standing and influence, she might just be able to secure him a trip to the core disciples' library. If so, it would be much better than him making a trip to the Valley of Falling Rain. Indeed, her standing is extremely high in the sect, such that no one dares to cross her. Your recovery medicine has won her approval, and she specially engaged us to look for you. I believe that you will surely be highly regarded by her, and it will be a great opportunity for you to rise through the ranks, the inner disciple said with a hint of envy in his eyes. Just make sure that you don't forget about me once you reach the top. It was for this young man that Bai Wanqing pummeled them to the ground. From the looks of it, it felt like Bai Wanqing had already made up her mind to cover this young man. It was for this reason that he did not dare disrespect the young man standing before him. Let's go then. Having confirmed this matter, Zhong Xian's eyes lit up as he nodded without any hesitation. Following behind this inner disciple, it did not take too long for them to arrive at Liu Lujie's residence. Are you the person who sold the recovery medicine to Senior Bai? When Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong saw that Zhong Xian was even younger than them and was a foreign face, they were slightly taken aback. The recovery medicine is something that I acquired by chance, and it's mostly used up, Zhong Xian said. I found that it's effective on most wounds and afflictions, so I have always viewed it as my greatest treasure. It's only because I had an urgent need for money that I was forced to sell it. I didn't think that it would end up helping Senior Bai. He knew about the analogy of the man with the jade. It was with no other choice that he had chosen to sell the gourd's bathwater, but he knew better than to reveal its true source. In any case, he should first claim that its quantity was limited, or else it would be troublesome if everyone who was injured came to him for medicine. The analogy talks about how a person who flaunts their wealth, beauty, talents, or the like could end up bringing envy upon them, and thus provoking others to harm them. I have already informed Senior Bai of the matter. She'll be here in a moment. I hope that you still have some recovery medicine left, or else I fear that even I won't be able to protect you, Liu Lujie said. Yes, I still do have some left, Zhong Xian replied with a smile. You should wait for Senior Bai here. I still have some matters to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave first, Liu Lujie said before heading to the courtyard. Being killed by I am low profile had made him feel deeply pressured. He realized that he was still sorely lacking. While he was a little fearful of Bai Wanqing, he did not want to waste even a second anymore. Stepping into the courtyard, he picked up his sword and began discussing a sword art with Wang Jiandong, who had been waiting for him for some time. This is the sword art that I am low profile executed, Wang Jiandong said as he swung his sword and released a surge of sword chi. No, that doesn't seem like it. I think it's something more like this, Liu Lujie said with a frown as he executed another move. Through their exchanges, they tried to decipher I am low profile's move while analyzing the various flaws in their own. Watching the entire process, Zhong Xian murmured quietly with a nod, their talent's not too bad. If one just looked at sheer talent, they were far above Dan Xiaotian. It was truly not easy to analyze that much just by observing. However, his swordsmanship was far too deep and layered to be interpreted that easily. Not even Bai Feng dared claim that he really understood what was going on, so it was indeed a little too tough on the two inner disciples to comprehend the essence of his swordsmanship. As a result, the more that they discussed, the more they deviated from the truth. As a teacher, Zhong Xian's eyelids began twitching as the urge to berate them welled up within him. He really could not bear seeing those two straying further and further. However, if he spoke, he would risk exposing his identity. Thus, he shifted uncomfortably in his seat as he tried to tune out what those two were talking about. Who? At this moment, the call of a beast echoed in the air. Bai Wanqing had arrived. Seeing this, Zhong Xian heaved a sigh of relief. It was fortunate that she had arrived, or else he might have succumbed to his urge and given those two a huge tongue lashing. For his swordsmanship to be distorted to such an extent, he really did not know what to say. As soon as Bai Wanqing leaped off the back of the aerial beast, she immediately recognized Zhong Xian and rushed over excitedly. I've finally found you. Do you still have the recovery medicine that you sold me back at the market? With just that little bottle, her grandfather was already showing some signs of recovery. If she could procure more of the medicine, Her grandfather might just be able to make a full recovery. I only have 3 bottles left at the moment. Zhongxian flicked his wrist and took out the few remaining jade bottles. I'll take all 3. Bai Wanqing said excitedly. She took the jade bottles and inspected their contents before heaving a F. With an expectant look on her face, she asked, "May I know if these bottles of recovery medicine were concocted by you, or did you acquire them from somewhere?" "I chanced upon them while exploring an ancient domain. These are the only bottles that I have left. If I hadn't been strapped for cash, I would never have brought them out," Zhongxian said. It was not as if the other party would ever know of the truth anyway. What a pity. Bai Wanqing sighed. She had hoped that she could buy a bit more, so she could not help but sigh in disappointment when she heard those words. She quickly took out 60 sword pavilion coins and passed it over to Zhongxian. Instead of receiving the money, Zhongxian looked at her and asked, "Senior Bai, I don't really need money anymore. Instead, there's actually a favor that I would like to ask of you." Those words immediately dampened Bai Wanqing's good mood. With a hint of displeasure between her eyebrows, she asked, "What is it?" If the other party had accepted her money, the deal would have been sealed. However, if the other party was asking her for a favor instead, it was likely something that could not be resolved with just money. Nevertheless, it was still a fact that the other party's medicine had saved her grandfather's life, so the other party could be considered their benefactor. As long as the request was not too overboard, she would try her best to help him. "Senior Bai, you should be able to tell that my cultivation has reached ancient sage 4 Dan consummation. I am only a step away from achieving a breakthrough," Zhongxian said. "You want me to help you achieve a breakthrough?" Bai Wanqing frowned. An advancement to pseudo-immortal signifies the gap between an inner disciple and a core disciple. The value is definitely not just 60 sword pavilion coins. "I understand that, and I don't intend to ask for such an insolent favor either," Zhongxian replied with a smile. "The current issue I am facing is a lack of reference material to refer to. I have been searching through the inner disciples library for quite some time, but I have been unable to find the information I am looking for. Thus, I was hoping that perhaps you could bring me into the core disciples library for a moment. I won't require too long, just 6 hours will do." "You wish to enter the core disciples library?" Bai Wanqing had been wondering what Zhongxian would ask for, but to think that this would be it. She did mention that a breakthrough was worth more than 60 sword pavilion coins, and that was a fact. However, if the other party had insisted on that favor, she still would have secured an immortalhood breakthrough pill for him to increase the chances of him making a breakthrough. If required, she could even have imparted some of her experiences making a breakthrough to him. Yet, instead of requesting for that, he only wanted to enter the core disciples library for 6 hours. Even Bai Wanqing felt like she would be taking advantage of this poor lad if she only gave him this much in exchange for such valuable medicine, so she said, "Choose another favor." "That's too simple." Zhongxian clasped his fist and said, "That's all I require." There was nothing that was more valuable than books to him. As long as he had books, achieving breakthroughs would be as easy as ABC to him. Bai Wanqing looked at Zhongxian for a moment before slowly nodding. "All right then." Everyone knew that great knowledge could be found in books, but reading was both tiresome and time-consuming. Thus, many sought to find shortcuts. It was hard to find someone who valued reading this much. "Senior Bai." Just as the two of them were about to leave the area, Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong walked into the main hall and greeted Bai Wanqing. "Are you currently studying I am low-profile swordsmanship?" Bai Wanqing asked. She had simulated her battle with I am low-profile in the ethereal hall many times in her mind after her tragic defeat. Earlier, when she was alighting from the aerial beast, she had seen the two of them practicing their swordsmanship, and she had quickly figured out what they were trying to do. "Yes, that's right." Liu Lujie nodded. "Did you manage to figure anything out?" Bai Wanqing asked. "Yes, but there are also many doubts that we have in mind that we would like to consult you on, Senior Bai," Liu Lujie said. He might have been the #1 expert of the inner disciples, but the young lady before him was a core disciple, as well as the granddaughter of one of the 3 grand elders. Furthermore, there was a good chance that she might be a true immortal expert. Her understanding of swordsmanship was bound to be much higher than his. "Feel free to speak." Bai Wanqing gestured. "The horizontal slash that I am low profile executed is simple and smooth. Despite its slow speed, it's somehow impossible to avoid it. Wang Jiandong and I have discussed it for quite some time now, but we are still unable to grasp the principles behind it." As Liu Lujie spoke, he raised his sword and slashed horizontally. He repeated the same movement 3 times, but every single one of them appeared to be off the mark compared to what I am low profile did. Seeing this, Zhongxian was rendered speechless. That was not a sword art at all but a simple movement of his sword. A horizontal slash would allow him to more easily dissipate all the sword qi coming his way while going from the defensive to the offensive in a single move, thus saving some energy. The key of the technique lay not in its speed but the angle and trajectory of the sword qi. It was that simple a move, but the other party was unable to figure it out after spending such a long time on it. To think that he had called them geniuses earlier. That technique combines offense with defense impeccably. Only the most ingenious of swordsmanship is able to achieve that. "It's perfectly normal that you aren't able to comprehend it," Bai Wanqing said. "Even after an intense discussion with Grandpa Feng, I'm still a little confused by the principles behind it. Nevertheless, I am just about able to execute it now." After saying those words, she raised her sword and conducted a horizontal slash. While it did not carry the same absolute might that I am low profile's attack did, it had roughly 40% resemblance to it. This attack isn't a specific sword art but simply a casual move that I am low profile executed. Bai Wanqing repeated what Grandpa Feng had told her earlier. It's truly astounding how powerful even a casual move from him is. I really wonder just what kind of swordsmanship level I am low profile has achieved. If you figure out who he is, make sure to inform me immediately. He's the only person I have felt so much admiration for in my entire life. I have already sworn to the heavens that I shall marry him in the future. Chapter 1973. Elder Bai Yi wishes to take in a disciple marry? Zhongxian's entire face convulsed a little as he took a step back in horror. This was too much information. "Sis, you mustn't joke around like this. My heart isn't able to take such stuff." To be fair, Bai Wanqing was quite a beautiful lady. Her long, slender legs drew the eyes of others to them, filling the minds of men with fantasies. But he was someone who already had a girlfriend. Not to mention, there were many rumors that Bai Wanqing was a female dinosaur who pummeled others when things did not go her way. Not even the toughest of men would be able to take her on. At the very least, he did not think that he had a masochistic streak in him. "What's wrong?" Noticing the horrified expression on Zhongxian's face, Bai Wanqing, who had been reveling in her fantasies a moment ago, turned to look at him doubtfully. "I only said that I'm going to marry. I am low profile. Why are you acting like this all of a sudden?" "Ah, it's nothing much," Zhongxian quickly replied as he wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead. At the same time, he made up his mind that he would take his other identity as I am low profile to the grave. Bai Wanqing looked at Zhongxian weirdly for a moment before turning her attention back to Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong. "Grandpa Feng explained the swordsmanship to me, and it should be something like that." Hearing Bai Wanqing's explanation, Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong widened their eyes in realization. On the other hand, Zhongxian found himself on the verge of vomiting after hearing the first few sentences, so he quickly turned his gaze away and tuned out whatever was being said. It really pained him to see how his swordsmanship was being distorted into something so unseemly. If he continued listening on, he might just become a raging dinosaur himself. To be honest, if not for the limitations of his cultivation, he would have loved to pry open the coffin of the Ascendant Cloudsword Pavilion's founder so as to see how he had groomed his successors for his heritage to end up like that. I really should find an opportunity to guide them, Zhongxian thought. A while later, Bai Wanqing was finally done lecturing her 2 juniors. With a satisfied smile on her face, she gestured for Zhongxian to get onto the back of her aerial beast. The peak where the core disciples lived was not located too far away. Nevertheless, it had a far more imposing presence than the inner disciples' peak. The upper body of the mountain was completely concealed amid the clouds, giving the feeling of an unworldly utopia. Zhongxian could clearly feel that the spiritual energy in the core disciple sector was much more concentrated than in the inner disciple sector, allowing one to cultivate much faster. The library is right ahead. Here is my identity token. You should be able to enter the premises with it. I'll come and fetch you in 6 hours, Bai Wanqing instructed as the aerial beast landed before a majestic tower. True to her reputation as a female dinosaur, while she admired those who read vastly, she was unable to find the patience within her to read. Instead of boring herself in the library, it would be better for her to deliver the medicine to her grandfather so that he would be spared from some suffering. You have my gratitude. Zhongxian clasped his fist. It was also preferable for him not to have Bai Wanqing following him around. After all, he had quite an unusual way of reading. Similar to the inner disciples' library, he was granted entry into the premises after flashing the token and paying the required sword pavilion coins. The cost for the inner disciples' library was 2 sword pavilion coins per hour, but the price was 10 times of that here. Every hour cost a hefty 20 sword pavilion coins. Fortunately, money was not an issue for him anymore. He paid the 120 sword pavilion coins and entered the library. The cultivation techniques and sword art manuals that the core disciples had access to were much more profound than those in the inner disciples' library. There were plenty of pseudo-immortal realm cultivation technique manuals in sight. With glowing eyes, Zhongxian swept through all the books in sight and collected them into the library of Heaven's Path. With the money that he had and those cultivation technique manuals, he would be able to advance his cultivation easily. Returning to her residence, Bai Wanqing immediately headed to her feeble grandfather's side. Grandfather, I have brought the medicine back, Bai Wanqing said as she took out the 3 jade bottles that she had just acquired. Is it the same recovery medicine that you fed me previously? Elder Bai Yi asked weakly as he uncorked the cap to examine the content. Weird. The sect physicians had forged many precious pills for his consumption, but none of them had been effective on his injuries. He had thought that something that could make him regain consciousness would surely be even greater in value, but it turned out to be something no different from clear water. He could not sense the slightest hint of spiritual energy from it. To be exact, he could not even sense medicinal energy in it. Was this really effective on him? I know it might seem unremarkable, but it's indeed what healed you previously. Hurry up and drink it, Bai Wanqing urged with a chuckle. Back then, she had bought it because she did not know what it was. If she had not been desperate, she never would have believed that such medicine could cure the wounds of her grandfather. I'll give it a try. Elder Bai Yi nodded as he tilted his head upward and drank it. As soon as the medicine flowed down his throat, he immediately felt the wounds that he had been helpless toward for so long alleviating a little. The energy that was relentlessly corroding his organs seemed to grow significantly thinner. Incredible. Elder Bai Yi's eyes glowed in exhilaration. He immediately uncorked and downed the other 2 bottles. How is it? Bai Wanqing asked anxiously. Who? Instead of responding to the question, Elder Bai Yi pressed his palm against his bed lightly, and the next instant, he was already in the courtyard with a sword in his hand. Tzzzzzzzzzz. The movements of his sword drew the spiritual energy in the surroundings along like a gust of wind. Move after move, the sword in his hand seemed to flow smoothly like a flowing river. There was no hint of the sickly old man that had been lying on the bed from him. Seeing how her grandfather had gone to the courtyard to practice his swordsmanship, Bai Wanqing's eyes turned red in agitation. Grandfather, have you fully recovered? As Elder Bai Yi's swordsmanship came to a stop, he turned to his granddaughter and spoke with irrepressible delight in his voice. I'm still a little way off from making a full recovery, but the destructive energy that I was unable to clear away previously has been cleared. As long as I nourish my body, I should be able to recover to my peak within a month. The bedridden him had already resigned himself to his fate back then. He had despaired at the thought that his life would come to an end just like that, but nothing he did had helped at all. He had never thought that this humble-looking medicine would bring him a miracle. Congratulations, grandfather, Bai Wanqing cried out. Elder Bai Yi continued practicing his swordsmanship for a moment as he felt spirit and strength swiftly returning to his body. Some time later, he finally turned to Bai Wanqing and said, "The person who sold you this medicine is my benefactor. Where is he now? I would like to meet him. He's an inner disciple." "I just took him to the core disciples library," Bai Wanqing replied. "The core disciples library?" Noticing her grandfather's incomprehension, Bai Wanqing quickly recounted her conversation with Zhongxian earlier. Despite giving away such a potent medicine, all he requested was access to the core disciples library. Elder Bai Yi found it hard to believe what he had just heard. "Indeed." Bai Wanqing nodded. She was also surprised by Zhongxian's request. It was such a good opportunity to ask for pointers on his cultivation and advance his strength, but he had given it up for this. After asking a few more questions, Elder Bai Yi nodded and said, "Let's head to the library to take a look." "Wait a moment first. Ah Feng." "Yes, old master." Bai Feng quickly walked over. "I have a transmogrification pill here. After consuming it, you'll be able to alter your appearance temporarily for 2 hours. Suppress your cultivation to the same level as that young friend, and try to find an opportunity to test his skills," Elder Bai Yi said as he passed a jade bottle over. "Test his skills?" Taking the pill, Bai Feng's eyebrows shot up in astonishment as he asked, "Old master, are you intending to take him in as your student?" As a sect elder, Elder Bai Yi would not test the skills of a disciple for no reason, let alone the fact that he was indebted to the other party. The only reason Elder Bai Yi would do this was because he was intending to take the other party in as his student. Despite knowing that Wanqing needs the medicine, he didn't make use of the opportunity to extort something valuable out of her. From that, it can be seen that he's a person with principles. Furthermore, he's saved my life. If I just turn a blind eye to him, won't that mean that my life is actually worthless? Elder Bai Yi placed his hands behind his back as he spoke deeply. No matter what, he was one of the 3 Grand Elders of the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion, a renowned figure in the Forsaken Continent. He could not let his benefactor walk away without doing anything for him. "I understand your intentions, old master," Bai Feng smiled. "Even someone of your influence and strength was unable to overcome the wounds sustained in the city of collapsed space. If others learn that the young man has something that can cure that affliction, it could draw those with malicious intentions to him even if he claims that he has no more of the medicine. You fear that he might meet with a mishap as a result of this, so you want to accept him as your student. In a sense, this is your way of protecting him." Countless treasures were hidden in the city of collapsed space, making it a region that experts looked toward. However, the dangers were very real, too. Not even 1 in 100 who dared venture into its depths managed to return alive. Most of the survivors also sustained severe injuries that were untreatable, and they eventually died with regrets. Many talented individuals had sought to uncover a way to overcome the dangers that lurked in the city of collapsed space, but none had succeeded so far. There was no doubt that a medicine that could cure the injuries sustained within the city of collapsed space would increase the chances of one's survival many times over. Thus, if the world learned that the young man had something like that, he would become the target of many experts. His life would be in grave danger. By accepting the young man as his disciple, even if someone wished to touch the young man, that person would have to consider if they were willing to offend Elder Bai Yi for it. This identity would shelter the young man from many dangers. Taking a deep breath, Elder Bai Yi said with a distant look in his eyes, "The Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion might be relatively safe, but human greed must never be underestimated. It's always better to be safe. This is my way of repaying my debt to the young man while protecting him from the dangers of the world. Of course, I also have my own expectations of my students. If his comprehension of swordsmanship is far too lacking, I'll just have to repay him some other way." "I understand. I'll have it done." Bai Feng nodded before leaving the room. "Grandfather, are you really accepting him as your student?" Bai Wanqing asked with a conflicted look on her face. "Wouldn't that mean that I'm a generation younger than him? I have never accepted any students before. Let's see if he's able to clear Bai Feng's examination before talking about that." Elder Bai Yi chuckled softly as he patted his granddaughter's head. "If he succeeds, he will be your senior uncle. You must treat him as such, all right?" I have heard a lot of stories about the things you've done in the sect, and I have only been turning a blind eye to them. Senior uncle. Bai Wanqing felt a little choked up within. It was just a moment ago that she had thought that the other party's earnest appearance looked a little adorable, but just the thought of a person younger than her becoming her senior uncle filled her with rage. A glint flashed within Bai Wanqing's eyes as she quickly said, "Grandfather, since you're fine now, I'll be heading out to cultivate." "Go on," Elder Bai Yi said with a wave of his hand. As Bai Wanqing walked out of the room, Elder Bai Yi sighed deeply before shaking his head. How could he possibly not see through his granddaughter's intentions? He knew his granddaughter well. Even if he could stop her this once, she would still find some other way to make trouble for that lad. He could only hope that the lad would be able to find a way to cope with his granddaughter. On the other hand, as soon as Bai Wanqing left the residence, the obedient look on her face immediately vanished. With a devilish expression, she scoffed, "I should at least teach that fellow a lesson. At most, I'll just address him as senior uncle before grandfather, but elsewhere, he will have to address me as senior." As a famed female dinosaur, not once had she been taken advantage of before. She really could not bring herself to call a person weaker and younger than herself senior uncle. Whoever that person was, she would make sure to drive the difference in their seniority into his head. Since her grandfather was going to test that lad anyway, she could be the first phase of the trial. Riding her aerial beast, she swiftly arrived before the core disciples' library. With her standing, even without her identity token, she could enter the premises right away. Didn't he say that he was here to study? The entire core disciples' library was bizarrely silent. It was as if no one was there at all. The sound of flipping pages, the retrieving and returning of books, or the strokes of a brush were nowhere to be heard. Bai Wanqing walked for quite a while before she finally found the person whom she was looking for walking down an aisle, glancing at the books around as he walked past. What was weird about this was how he had positioned himself at the center of the aisle, which meant that the books on both sides were out of his reach. This gave the feeling that he was not going to grab any books from the shelves at all. Perplexed, she followed him for quite a while, but just like she had thought, the young man simply walked from aisle to aisle without taking any books. Bai Wanqing finally walked up to him and asked, "What are you doing?" "Oh, you're here." Seeing that it was her, Zhongxian gestured to the shelves and replied with a smile, __I am still searching for the book I want." To be honest, even he was impressed by the quantity of books in the core disciples' library. After such a long period of time, he had not even collected half of what was in there. It seemed like he would really need 6 whole hours to take everything in. Chapter 1974 Knocking Out Bai Wanqing. I've been to the core disciples' library many times. What books do you need? Tell me and I'll bring them here for you, Bai Wanqing said with a frown. She could not possibly make a move there, where the valuable heritage of the sect was stored. However, she could not just keep following him around till the 6 hours were up either. "It's fine, I'm just looking around at the moment. I haven't really decided on which book I want. Don't worry, I'll make sure to head out once the 6 hours are over," Zhongxian said with a wave of his hand. It had not been easy for him to get in there, so he definitely had to collect all the books. This would be extremely helpful for future advancement in his cultivation and battle techniques. Seeing how the young man's eyes had already moved on to the next shelf while he was speaking, Bai Wanqing felt like ages would have passed by the time the young man was done. So, she nodded for a moment as she said, "Is that so? May I trouble you to come with me for a moment?" She had never been a patient person. Waiting there for a few more hours could really cause her head to explode. "Where do you want to lead me to?" Noticing the bizarre look on Bai Wanqing's face, Zhongxian finally tore his gaze away from the books and looked at her. "Is there a problem?" "Not really. I can't really say it here. Can you come with me to the silent chamber over there?" Bai Wanqing gestured to the isolated space where cultivators could study and practice some of the theories in the books. "Ah!" Zhongxian was slightly taken aback. "I'm not too sure if this is really appropriate. I don't mean any offense, but I wish to focus on my cultivation for the time being." Bai Wanqing's eyebrows leaped up. At that moment, she really wanted to strangle the fool before her to death. You're misunderstanding something. I just wish to ask you some questions relating to cultivation. Ah, I see. Zhongxian visibly heaved a sigh of relief. He valued his purity a lot. He could not lose it there. You. Seeing how relieved Zhongxian was, Bai Wanqing nearly punched him in the face. She knew that she had a violent temper, but at the very least, she was pretty. Many in the core disciples would more than fancy the idea of having some private time with her, and yet this fellow actually reacted in such a manner when she proposed going into a private chamber with him. What do you mean by this? Did you think that I would eat you up? Bai Wanqing took 2 deep breaths to quell the flames in her heart before walking toward the private chamber. She might not have known this fellow for long, but this was the first time that she had met someone who could make one's blood pressure rise with every word that he said. It served him right to be single. After the 2 of them entered the silent chamber, the doors suddenly closed. What are you going to do? Zhongxian placed his hands defensively before his chest as he looked at Bai Wanqing warily. Bai Wanqing rolled her eyes. She activated the sound isolation barrier in the room before turning to look at Zhongxian. I want to ask you what your name is and what your current cultivation realm is. Didn't I tell you while we were making our way here? I am Zhongxian, and my current cultivation realm is Dimension Shatterer Realm Consummation, Zhongxian replied. The other party had asked those 2 questions before, and thinking that there was no need to hide the truth, he simply replied honestly. Dimension Shatterer Realm Consummation, is it? Bai Wanqing muttered as her aura swiftly plummeted down to his level. I have suppressed my cultivation to Dimension Shatterer Realm Consummation as well. I wish to have a duel with you. The losing party has to heed the words of the winning party obediently from now on. You want to have a duel with me? Zhongxian was confused. He had thought that Bai Wanqing was lusting over his flesh, but to think that she just wanted to have a duel with him. Just that, what in the world was this female dinosaur planning? That's right. Bai Wanqing nodded. You said that the losing party has to heed the words of the winning party from now on. Does that mean that I'll have to commit suicide if you ask me to do so? Zhongxian asked. It was pretty much a guaranteed victory for him, but he did not like to engage in such duels. What kind of person do you think I am? Don't worry, all I will ask of you is to address me as your senior no matter what kind of identity you assume in the future. Just like any junior, you shall treat me with the utmost respect and obey my orders. Bai Wanqing smirked as she began stretching her arms, causing cracking sounds to echo in the air. On the other hand, Zhongxian was so bewildered by the request that one could almost see question marks above his head. Haven't I been calling you senior Bai all along? Alright, I really have to finish browsing through my books, so I don't really have time to spar with you. Pardon me, but I'll be taking my leave. After saying those words, he turned around to walk out of the room. Where do you think you are going? With a bellow, Bai Wanqing whipped out her sword and directed it right toward Zhongxian. Regardless of whether he was willing to acknowledge it or not, there was no mistake in beating him into submission first. As she was only suppressing her cultivation down to Dimension Shatterer Realm Consummation, she was able to execute more sword maneuvers than she could back in the ethereal hall. At the same time, she was also much more accustomed to her current strength. This single pierce was far more powerful than the attack that she had executed in the ethereal hall, and it instantaneously sealed all of Zhongxian's path of retreat. She had no intention of killing Zhongxian, but years of experience as a tyrant told her that people listened better after going through a beating. She would feel much more assured after beating the person in question into submission. On the other hand, Zhongxian was rendered speechless by Bai Wanqing's actions. It was no wonder others called her a female dinosaur. It was impossible to reason with her. With a series of quick Z-shaped sidesteps, he dodged all of Bai Wanqing's attacks as he shrugged helplessly and said, Senior Bai, I really am no match for you. Let's not continue with this meaningless duel. What? Bai Wanqing was shocked to see how easily Zhongxian managed to avoid all her attacks. Not only so, the latter even had the leisure to be shrugging and talking to her. Take out your sword and let me see your true prowess. Don't blame me for not going easy on you otherwise. Su. After saying those words, Bai Wanqing executed 3 consecutive slashes toward Zhongxian, each faster than the previous. In an instant, the silent chamber was completely filled with sword chi. When the library was built, there had been concerns that cultivators would suddenly release tremendous energy from suddenly epiphanies, resulting in the destruction of the building. Thus, the silent chambers were built to be extraordinarily resilient. The reinforcement formation constructed around it was such that even core disciples would be unable to phase it. As such, even though Bai Wanqing's attack was powerful, it did not tear down the wall at all. Zhong Xian's silhouette tilted from side to side as he adept dodged the three swords. At the same time, he spoke earnestly. Look, you are a core disciple while I am just a mere inner disciple. There's no meaning in someone as powerful as you bullying me. Bai Wanqing was getting more and more astounded by the moment. Zhong Xian appeared to be far stronger than she had expected him to be. Her motivation to fight was growing with each passing second. Quickly draw your sword. I'm going to get serious now. Hu! A burst of sword chi gushed forth as Bai Wanqing's sword pierced forth with even greater speed than before. As someone who cultivated the heavy snow swordsmanship, she was capable of moving at extreme speeds with precision. Driving her current prowess at Dimension Shatterer realm consummation to the limits, numerous after-images of her appeared all around the silent chamber, surrounding Zhong Xian. It felt like innumerable attacks would fall upon Zhong Xian as soon as his guard fell. But as swift as Bai Wanqing's movements were, Zhong Xian was even faster. It was almost as if she was constantly a step slower than Zhong Xian. Be it her sword or sword chi, nothing was reaching Zhong Xian at all. How can this be? Bai Wanqing remarked in astonishment as she hastened her movements further. She had thought that she would at least be able to force Zhong Xian into a coma with her attacks, but somehow, the other party simply yawned in boredom as he continued spewing the same nonsense. Even if I draw my sword, it's not as if I can defeat you. Aren't you forcing me to commit suicide at this rate? Ah. Bai Wanqing felt deeply stifled within. If your forehead was laden with sweat and you were gasping for air, I might still be able to believe that you are really no match for me. But here you are, yawning and scratching your back lazily, not even bothering to put on an act. Are you messing with me? Frustrated, Bai Wanqing's movements grew faster and faster, but her opponent, despite repeatedly claiming that he was not a match for her, managed to match her speed with ease. It was as if he was a leaf on the ocean. No matter how powerful the waves and ocean currents were, they were unable to drown it. Draw your sword. This continued for 20 moves, but Bai Wanqing was unable to even nick Zhong Xian's sleeves. Unable to stand being looked down upon like that, she was starting to lose her temper. Don't blame me for getting nasty. Hu! With a flick of her sword, she executed her strongest trump card, the heavy snow swordsmanship. She had never been a patient person, or else she would not have ended up crippling so many core disciples. Her inability to harm the other party despite the moves that she had executed thus far had ground the little bit of patience she had down to nothing. Her sword chi materialized as snow, causing the temperature in the surroundings to plummet. Sigh. Walking calmly amid the other party's swordsmanship, Zhong Xian rubbed his glabella as he sighed deeply. I really wish to live a low-profile life, but why do you have to force me so? All he wanted to do was to read his books and advance his cultivation quietly. Why was this simply so hard? Even while he was just visiting a library, someone simply grabbed him from where he was and forced him into a fight. Just how in the world did I offend you for you to have to ruin my peaceful life like that? What are you saying? Bai Wanqing roared as she saw Zhong Xian muttering to himself, seemingly unconcerned by her strongest move at all. However, the next instant, a thought came to her mind, and she widened her eyes in astonishment. Wait a moment, it can't be that you are actually within the same cultivation realm. Most core disciples would not be able to withstand her heavy snow swordsmanship, let alone an inner disciple. Even Liu Lujie would be defeated swiftly under its might. Yet, this little-known person was able to tread between her attacks without sustaining the slightest damage. She could not help recalling the person who had killed her twice back in the ethereal hall. I am low profile. Could that mysterious person really be the young man before her? Just as Bai Wanqing spoke her doubts, the young man before her sighed deeply as his leisurely eyes suddenly turned frighteningly sharp. Since I can't hide it any longer, I'll have to ask you to pardon me for my discourtesy. Who? The next instant, a palm strike appeared right before her. His arm was not long, but it immediately sealed her sword chi. The immense force coming at her caused Bai Wanqing's breathing to become a little ragged as she struggled to catch her breath. No. Not expecting that a dimension-shatterer realm consummation cultivator would be able to bring out such tremendous might, Bai Wanqing narrowed her eyes as she swiftly released the seal on her cultivation. Catcher! Catcher! In an instant, her cultivation rose back up to the pseudo-immortal realm, and it was still surging upward. Lesser pseudo-immortal. Great pseudo-immortal. Earthly pseudo-immortal. Heavenly pseudo-immortal. Lesser true immortal. Just as many had guessed, she had overcome the limitations of the pseudo-immortal realm and reached the true immortal realm. True immortal realm experts were rumored to possess boundless zhenqi. Even in the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion, she was already more than qualified to become an inner elder. Who? Even as her cultivation returned to normal, the first thing she did was retreat, but for some reason, no matter where she retreated to, the palm strike continued following her closely. It was almost as if the other party was able to predict her movements. How is this possible? Are you really a dimension-shatterer realm consummation cultivator? Bai Wanqing was frenzied. She could clearly feel that the other party's cultivation was only at dimension-shatterer realm consummation, but for some reason, despite having regained her true cultivation as a lesser true immortal, she was actually unable to dodge his attack. It was as if the other party was able to read into her. But how could that be? The Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion was filled with remarkable geniuses, and there were a handful of people were able to challenge those whose cultivation was beyond them. But usually, a cultivation stage or two was the limit. After all, everyone there was an expert, and the cultivation techniques and sword arts that they all practiced were the same. Yet, as a lesser true immortal fighting against a dimension-shatterer realm cultivator, she actually felt helpless. Really, how powerful was this fellow? I don't believe it. Releasing another powerful surge of energy, Bai Wanqing's prowess as a true immortal pulsated into the surroundings. It was to such an extent that the reinforcement formation cast around the silent chamber was starting to creak under the pressure. Don't bother, it's useless. The young man's voice echoed by her ear. Who? The palm strike abruptly vanished from view. Putong. Bai Wanqing's body collapsed to the ground. What should I do? Zhong Xian sighed as he looked upon the unconscious Bai Wanqing. Due to the latter pushing him again and again, he felt like he might be pressured into doing something that he was reluctant about if he did not make a move soon, but right after making a move, he regretted it. If it had been any other inner disciple, he would still have had his own means of dealing with the other party, but the person before him was the granddaughter of one of the 3 Grand Elders, as well as a lesser true immortal. His soul arts would not work as well against such an opponent, and if any mishap came to the other party, he would surely suffer grave consequences. He could not afford to become a wanted man less than a day after entering the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion. Outstanding people always have an endless source of trouble. Zhong Xian sighed helplessly. Chapter 1975. Too weak. If he was violated because he was not as strong as Bai Wanqing, he would have no choice but to accept it. However, it was clear that Bai Wanqing was no match for him at all. If so, how could he possibly allow himself to be violated over here? Unfortunately for him, his actions had also inadvertently exposed his identity as I am low profile. If he failed to deal with this properly, it could spell major trouble. There are only 2 options for me now. I could choose to kill her and dispose of her corpse. No, that wouldn't work. Her entry into the core disciples' library would be logged, and someone might have seen us entering the silent chamber together. If she were to disappear all of a sudden, it's very likely that someone might track the matter down to me. Otherwise, I can also force her to make a vow to never reveal this secret. It seems like I can only count on this then. Zhong Xian stared at Bai Wanqing's unconscious body for a moment before sighing deeply yet again. It felt like sighs had been coming out from his mouth a lot more frequently over the past day. With a flick of his finger, he shot a surge of Heaven's Path zhenqi into Bai Wanqing's body, and the latter's eyelashes immediately fluttered a little. Her eyes slowly opened, and she swiftly assessed her surroundings with a slightly confused look. Senior Bai, I don't like to stain my hands with blood, but I'll have you vow that you will never. Just as Zhongxian was going to control the heaven's path Shanqi he had infused into Bai Wanqing's body to force her to heed his words, the young lady suddenly turned to him with an overexcited look and kowtowed, Senior Zhong. No, it should be Senior Uncle Zhong instead. Can you teach me swordsmanship? As long as you impart to me your swordsmanship, I'll do whatever you want me to. Senior Uncle. Once again, Zhongxian found himself completely dumbfounded by Wanqing's actions. Are you the weather? The way that you change your face is simply too fast. It was not too long ago that you were so determined to kill me, but your attitude suddenly made a 180 degrees turn. Really, what is going through your mind? Besides, where did you get the idea that you should be calling me Senior Uncle? But that being said, Zhongxian's motive was to stop the other party from revealing his secret. As long as she was willing to keep her mouth shut, it didn't really matter how she addressed him. He assessed Bai Wanqing for a moment before asking, Do you really want to learn my swordsmanship? Bai Wanqing nodded her head vehemently. In that instant that she was knocked out, she was absolutely certain that the young man before her was indeed low profile. Only that man could overcome her heavy snow swordsmanship so easily despite the difference in their cultivation realms. This young man's swordsmanship was far stronger than that of Grandpa Feng. If she could learn from him, the sky would be the limit for her mastery of swordsmanship. She would need not worry about those monsters from the core disciples anymore, and she might even be able to surpass them. She couldn't allow such a precious opportunity to slip past her fingers. It's not entirely impossible for me to impart to you my swordsmanship, but I do have a condition. Through Zhongxian's eye of insight, he could tell that Bai Wanqing was making this request with utmost sincerity. Knowing that there was a way to solve this amicably, he heaved a sigh of relief before saying, I am a person who doesn't like to stand out. I don't wish for others to learn of my other identity and capabilities. If you are able to keep it a secret, I promise that I'll allow your swordsmanship to grow swiftly within a short period of time. Even the position as the #1 sword practitioner of the core disciple would be easily within your reach. Senior Uncle, you can be assured that my lips are sealed. Realizing that the young man had already seen through her intentions, Bai Wanqing's face reddened. She quickly straightened her back, held her palm up, and vowed solemnly, I, Bai Wanqing, swear to the gods that I will not reveal the slightest information regarding Senior Uncle Zhongxian. If I were to violate this vow, may thousands of arrows pierce through my heart. With this, Zhongxian's heart was finally settled. In his short period of time here, he came to learn that the term God had a special significance to the people of the Azure. No one would dare to go against a vow to the gods for fear of heavenly retribution. Of course, that was just what he had heard and seen so far. As for whether it was indeed the case or just a superstition, that still required further investigation. The horizontal slash that you have demonstrated and lectured Liu Lujie and Wang Jiandong on earlier is wrong. I'll explain it to you now. As if having finally found an outlet for the frustration building up in his chest, Zhongxian immediately went through the crux of his swordsmanship excitedly. Listening to the explanation, Bai Wanqing's body shuddered with zeal. She never thought that swordsmanship could be utilized in such a manner. Simple as it may seem, the prowess that one could draw forth was boundless. All right, I'll leave you here to slowly comprehend what I have said. I'll head back to browsing through the books. Seeing that Bai Wanqing had fallen into deep thoughts, she would stand up from time to test the theories of some of the moves to further her understanding. Zhongxian opened the doors of the silent chamber and walked out. Just like before, he continued walking through the aisles to collect the books into the Library of Heaven's Path. 2 hours later, he was finally done collecting all of the books. Compile. Zhongxian willed. All of the books relating to pseudo-immortal realm immediately gathered together to form a new book. Zhongxian anxiously flipped open the newly compiled book to take a look, and a moment later, relief could be clearly seen on his face. Just like what he had guessed, the books in the core disciples' library were enough to compile a complete pseudo-immortal realm Heaven's Path divine art. As long as he had sufficient immortal pills, he should be able to swiftly make a breakthrough. There were also some true immortal realm cultivation technique manuals in the core disciples library too, but due to their lacking numbers, he was only halfway through compiling the perfected manual thus far. I should be making my way back now, Zhong Xian thought as he took a look at the time. It had already been nearly 6 hours since he had arrived in the library. Stretching his back lazily, he headed back to the silent chamber and walked in. As soon as he entered, a burst of sword chi flew right past him. The movements of her slash appeared to be slow, but the trajectory of the movement seemingly formed a barrier that sealed the space ahead of her, keeping others at bay. At the same time, she released a burst of sword chi that carried the might of a serpent, severing everything in its path. Not too bad. Zhong Xian nodded in approval. Bai Wanqing had only practiced the technique for 2 hours so far, but her form and conceptualization were already 60% on point. That being said, it was still far from matching up to him. Senior uncle. Noticing Zhong Xian's arrival, Bai Wanqing quickly halted her practice and rushed up to greet him. The more she practiced that swordsmanship, the more astounded she was by its might. At this moment, she was filled with nothing but respect for the young man before her. Her initial thoughts of marrying the other party had already vanished from her mind. She knew that she was unworthy of taking such an outstanding individual as her spouse. Yuan. I have already finished looking through the books, so I'm going to head back to cultivate now, Zhong Xian said. I hope that you can keep my identity a secret from Bai Feng and your grandfather too. I don't wish to get involved in too many things at the moment. Yes, senior uncle. Bai Wanqing nodded obediently. Obviously, she was only going to keep this secret to herself. Why would she even share it with anyone? If everyone were to bug her senior uncle Zhong to learn from him, the time that she would have learning under him would be reduced. That's good, that's good. Zhong Xian nodded before turning around to leave. In any case, he had left a surge of heaven's path shanqi in Bai Wanqing's body, so he didn't really fear her messing around behind his back either. Senior uncle, please wait a moment. Grandpa Feng is waiting for you on your way back to your residence. He intends to test your strength and swordsmanship. Bai Wanqing suddenly recalled a matter and hurriedly called out. Test my strength and my swordsmanship. Zhong Xian was perplexed. Was his identity already compromised? But even if his identity was compromised, the ones who would make a move on him should be the inner elders instead of Bai Feng. Yes, your recovery medicine has treated my grandfather's injuries. As repayment, my grandfather hopes to take you in as his student. However, he fears that your capabilities might not be able to meet up to his expectations, so he instructed Grandpa Feng to test your strength. Bai Wanqing unhesitatingly gave her own kin away. Hearing those words, Zhong Xian nodded in realization. Everything suddenly clicked together with puzzle pieces. That explained why this woman was so determined to make a move on him earlier, attempting to force him into addressing her as senior and heed her words. It turned out that she was afraid that she would be pushed down the hierarchy of seniority if he were to become her grandfather's student. This also explained why she addressed him as senior uncle instead of teacher. What's Bai Feng's current cultivation realm? Zhong Xian asked. With his superior swordsmanship, as long as he could dominate the flow of the battle right from the start, he would still stand a good chance at defeating Bai Wanqing. However, it was clear that Bai Feng was stronger than Bai Wanqing, so he could be a little more troublesome to deal with. Just like my grandfather, Grandpa Feng is a high immortal, Bai Wanqing replied. High immortal? Zhong Xian's lips twitched a little. Are you certain that he would make a move? High immortals were also known as immortal kings. Only the core elders of the sect would possess such a level of strength. Even though Zhong Xian had made significant advancements in his swordsmanship, the overwhelming difference in their absolute strength would leave him no choice but to flee as far as he could against such an enemy. He simply wouldn't stand a chance at all. Yes, Bai Wanqing replied. It's a direct order from my grandfather. Grandpa Feng would not disregard his order. This set Zhong Xian's mind thinking. The current situation was yet another dilemma for him. If he were to win against Grandpa Feng, that would definitely discourage Elder Bai Yi from taking him in as his student. The downside to that plan was that it would expose his identity as I am low profile. Given the current limitations of his cultivation, he knew that he didn't have the capability to seal Bai Feng's mouth. On the other hand though, if he were to lose the battle, there was no guarantee that Elder Bai Yi wouldn't insist on taking him in as his student. To be honest, after how far he had come, he was deeply reluctant to become the student of another. Zhongxian closed his eyes for a moment before he turned to Bai Ruanqing and said, "I might need you to put on a show together with me." "Sure." Bai Ruanqing replied without any hesitation. They quickly discussed the plans before Zhongxian walked out of the core disciples' library alone. He flitted forth swiftly, dashing from the core disciple sector back to the inner disciple sector. Without an aerial beast to ferry one around, the trip would take roughly 2 hours. As Zhongxian dashed ahead, he made a conscious effort to limit his speed to the level of an ordinary dimension Shatterer realm consummation cultivator. After traveling for roughly an hour, just as he was crossing a particularly remote region, Zhongxian suddenly felt a heavy might weighing down on him from the surroundings. Alarmed, he swiftly halted his footsteps and scanned his surroundings warily. In the next moment, a young figure walked out from the woods and appeared before him. He was no other than Bai Feng. Having consumed the transmogrification pill, his current appearance was vastly different from before. Nevertheless, Zhongxian was still able to clearly see through the facade via his eye of insight. Hula. Without speaking a single word, Bai Feng drew his sword and lunged at Zhongxian. His cultivation had already been suppressed to the same level as Zhongxian, Dimension Shatterer Realm Consummation. What? Who are you? Why are you making a move on me? Don't you know that the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion prohibits anyone from making a move on its disciples? Caught off guard by Bai Feng's sudden assault, Zhongxian's face paled in horror. He swiftly retreated fearfully, but fear seemed to have gripped his legs, causing him to fall to the ground. Who? Before he knew it, Bai Feng's sword was already pressed against his neck. Bai Feng wasn't in a good mood at the moment. It wasn't easy for the old master to want to take in a student, but who could have thought that this fellow would actually be so weak? He hadn't even exerted 1/10 of his full strength in his current cultivation realm yet, but the other party was already cornered by him. If such a person were to become the old master's student, it would really sully the old master's reputation. Pick up your sword. If you can't withstand my strike, the only fate that awaits you today is death. Bai Feng uttered coldly as he took a step back. Grandpa Feng, allow me to deal with him instead. In this instant, a masked lady dressed in a white robe descended from the sky. Through Zhanqi telepathy, Bai Feng knew that this masked lady was Bai Ruanqing. A slight frown formed on his face, but he eventually chose to back down. Hula. Bai Ruanqing tossed a sword over to Zhongxian's side before executing a series of relentless slashes against the latter. The flustered Zhongxian hurriedly picked up the sword to parry Bai Ruanqing's movements, but his form and maneuvers were all around the place. It was clear that he had never really trained diligently in the way of the sword before. It was hard to tell whether his skill was lacking or his strength was simply not up to par, but one particular clash caused the sword in his hand to fly off from his hands. It stabbed into the floor not too far away as it reverberated loudly with a metallic whung. Completely powerless after losing his weapon, Zhongxian's body stiffened as another sword was pressed against his neck yet again. With a look of disappointment on her face, Bai Ruanqing retracted her sword before walking over toward Bai Feng. With a voice that expressed deep disapproval, she remarked, "Too weak." Chapter 1976a show Zhongxian's face reddened in embarrassment upon hearing those words. Zhongxian's face reddened in embarrassment upon hearing those words. He simply stood there with a confused look on his face, not knowing what he should do at all. "Grandpa Feng, let's go," Bai Ruanqing said. Bai Feng appeared to be a little conflicted at how things had gone, but eventually, he nodded slightly and left together with Bai Ruanqing. "It seems like I have managed to fool him for the time being." Watching as the two figures departed into the distance, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. He really had no intention of becoming a disciple of an elder or something. Well, if Elder Bai Yi wanted to become his student, he might still consider the matter a little. Thus, He chose to put on the earlier show together with Bai Ruanqing. By feigning weakness and having Bai Ruanqing to report on the matter personally, it was highly likely that elder Bai Yi would give up on the idea of taking him in as his student. After settling the issue, Zhong Xian quickly flitted all the way back to his residence. When he walked through the residence doors, he noticed that Dan Xiaotian was still practicing his swordsmanship. The latter was making good progress with the third young master's swordsmanship, having achieved a mastery of roughly 90% in terms of form and conceptualization. With sufficient money on hand this around, Zhong Xian bought several basic immortal pills for him and provided him some guidance on his cultivation. It didn't take too long for Dan Xiaotian to advance his cultivation to ancient sage 2 Dan. As for Cao Changli, despite his lustful nature, he was much more hardworking than Sun Qiong when it came to cultivating. As a bandit, he knew of the importance of strength. After receiving an ample amount of basic immortal pills and high-tier cultivation techniques, his progress in his cultivation was extremely swift. Over the past 10 days since coming under Zhong Xian, he had managed to advance his cultivation from Great Sage 2 Dan to Great Sage 3 Dan, and he was steadily progressing toward Great Sage 4 Dan. At this rate, he should be able to push for a breakthrough to Ancient Sage within the next few days. Zhong Xian told them to keep up the good work with their cultivation before finally returning back to his room. It's my turn to make a breakthrough now. Using the second ethereal token he had, Zhong Xian bought 100 standard immortal pills before swiftly browsing through the pseudo-immortal realm Heaven's Path Divine Art once more. Once he was ready, he calmed his mind and began his cultivation. He first swallowed a few standard immortal pills, which instantaneously dissolved into a relentless current of spiritual energy within his meridians. He swiftly circulated them around his body before refining them into his zhenqi. His cultivation had already reached the zenith of dimension Shatterer realm consummation previously. With the appropriate cultivation technique in hand right now, he would be able to overcome the bottlenecks in the way of his cultivation without any problems. As he assimilated the spiritual energy from the standard immortal pills, his zhenqi began to undergo a qualitative change. 10 minutes later, when he finally built up zhenqi across the tipping point, his cultivation burst forward and tore through the final ceiling that was limiting it. He had successfully reached pseudo-immortal realm, however, he didn't stop just there. He consumed several more standard immortal pills and continued cultivating. Cultivating the pseudo-immortal realm Heaven's Path Divine Art caused his standard immortal pills to deplete swiftly, but fortunately, he had enough money to sustain his cultivation this time around. As soon as he sensed the momentum of his cultivation dying down, he would immediately consume a couple of standard immortal pills to replenish his energy. Under the circulation of the Heaven's Path Divine Art, his cultivation rose steadily. Lesser pseudo-immortal. Greater pseudo-immortal. Earthly pseudo-immortal. By the end of 2 hours, he had already successfully raised his cultivation by an entire realm, reaching heavenly pseudo-immortal realm. Nearly all 100 of the standard immortal pills he had purchased earlier had been depleted in the midst of his cultivation. At the same time, he realized that standard immortal pills were no longer effective enough to raise his cultivation anymore. If he wanted to advance his cultivation further, he would require something more potent. Alacrity in thoughts, purity of soul, and invulnerability to flames. So this is the strength of a pseudo-immortal. Zhong Xian clenched his fists tightly in agitation. His cultivation had only risen by another realm, but the increment in his strength was massive. There was a qualitative difference between Dimension Shatterer realm and pseudo-immortal realm. Be it his lifespan or strength, they were completely different from before. If what he was using before was origin energy, the energy that flowed through his meridians this very instant could only be described as immortal energy. This was the energy that only immortals were able to access. It's really a huge stroke of luck that I was able to knock out Bai Ruanqing. Zhong Xian thought in relief. It was only after feeling the humongous strength in his body did he realize how tremendous the fundamental difference between him and Bai Ruanqing had been. Had he not taken the initiative and strike out relentlessly back then, most likely, he would have been the one who would have lost the battle once Bai Ruanqing had regained her footing in the battle. Putting aside true immortals, even pseudo-immortals were already at least 10 times stronger than Dimension Shatterer realm cultivators. At the same time, the massive growth in his cultivation also gave him a deeper insight into what the god's sword intent truly was. With the current might of his swordsmanship, he felt that he would be able to subdue even heavenly true immortals with ease now. As for high immortals, as he had never crossed blows with one before, he had no clear gauge of how powerful they actually were. Nevertheless, based on the records from books, it didn't seem likely that the current him would be a match for them. It's also about time for Vicious and my clone to make a breakthrough too, Zhong Xian thought. He bought more standard immortal pills before letting his clone and Vicious out to cultivate. As for the Dongshu gourd, it was still nowhere close to recovering its original body even after eating 100 standard immortal pills. As soon as Zhong Xian let it out, it immediately began bawling for food. Finding it too noisy, Zhong Xian unhesitatingly stuffed it into his storage ring. Just thinking about how he would have to deal with the annoying Dongshu gourd left him with a huge headache. He must have sinned greatly in his previous life to deserve this. And to make things worse, he still didn't know what it was capable of other than the fact that its bathwater could be used to heal injuries. Maybe he could try letting a high immortal split the Dongshu gourd in the future. If it was able to survive even that, he could consider using it as a shield in the future. While Zhong Xian was still cultivating, Bai Wanqing and Bai Feng had already returned back to Elder Bai Yi's residence. "How is it?" Elder Bai Yi asked. "The young mistress has tested the young man's skill personally, so I'll allow her to speak instead." Bai Feng took a step back and said, "Grandfather, Zhong Xian's swordsmanship is truly horrid. He is incapable of even executing the most basic sword art. I have suppressed my cultivation down to his level and tested him out with some of the most fundamental swordsmanships of our sect, but it's already more than enough to subdue him. He's unqualified to be your student," Bai Wanqing exclaimed. As she said these words, she couldn't help but feel even deeper admiration for her senior uncle. Within the sect, there were countless who would bleed their heads dry just to become her grandfather's student, but her senior uncle actually had no interest in it at all. He would go through so much trouble to put on an act just to turn it down. He sure was a humble person. All cultivators should really learn from his example. On the other hand, Elder Bai Yi frowned upon hearing his granddaughter's words. "I have taken down a recording of the earlier battle. Do take a look," Bai Wanqing said as she passed a record crystal over. Elder Bai Yi took the crystal and infused his zhenqi in. The earlier scenario surfaced on the crystal, showing how Bai Wanqing had managed to easily subdue Zhong Xian. "Look, I'm not lying to you, right? His skill is really abhorrent. Grandfather, it would only undermine your authority if you take a person like him in as your student," Bai Wanqing exclaimed. "All right, I understand. You should take your leave for now. There are some private matters which I want to discuss with our Feng privately," Elder Bai Yi replied with a wave of his hand. "Yes, Grandfather." Bai Wanqing turned around and left the room. Barely after she left the room, Elder Bai Yi turned to look at Bai Feng and asked, "What's your view of the matter? I'm confident of my disguise, but for some reason, I got a feeling that the other party anticipated my arrival. His eyes and gestures speak of fluster, but I can sense a hint of assurance from him. It's like he isn't worried that he would be killed at all." Bai Feng revealed the doubts that had been in his heart. He had always been a very discerning and meticulous person. Even though Zhong Xian had put up a good act, he was still able to keenly notice that something was off. If he was really afraid, he would have tried to run away or desperately cry for help. He wouldn't have reacted in the way he did. Elder Bai Yi nodded in agreement. He shared the same thoughts as Bai Feng too. "Then, old master," Bai Feng asked doubtfully, "I have really spoiled that granddaughter of mine. She's an intelligent and discerning child, but she often allows her emotions to overtake her rationality, resulting in that incredible reckless nature of hers. Usually, she would have probably gone to confront that young man straight, but this time around, she waited patiently for you to appear before confronting that fellow. I find it hard to believe that this isn't an act between that young man and her." Elder Bai Yi stroked his beard and he sighed bitterly. "An act? Old master, you mean that?" Bai Feng frowned upon hearing those words. That lass left the residence shortly after your departure, so I had someone follow her. My men reported that she had entered the core disciples' library and shared a private chamber together with Zhongxian. She ended up staying in the private chamber for nearly 2 hours straight. Elder Bai Yi tossed a jade token over to Bai Feng as he spoke. Bai Feng quickly caught the token, and after seeing the contents, his lips twitched in horror. For a man and a woman to share a private chamber for such a long period of time, could there really be something between them? Old Master, are you suspecting that there might be some kind of unusual relationship between Zhongxian and the young mistress? Bai Feng asked. I want you to discreetly follow her the next few days so as to find out what she's up to. Report anything that you find to me right away. Also, make sure to keep a lookout on Zhongxian as well. I would have never thought that an inner disciple would be capable of making that fearless granddaughter of mine obediently put on an act together with him. I sure would like to see what he's truly capable of. Elder Bai Yi instructed. To be able to become one of the 3 Grand Elders of the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion, Elder Bai Yi's ability to analyze situations was naturally superb as well. He was afraid that her granddaughter would cause some kind of trouble after learning that he was intending to take Zhongxian as his student, so he had his men follow her. As a result, he caught wind of the happenings at the core disciples' library too. The fact that they had been together with one another in the private chamber for quite some time, as well as his granddaughter's sudden appearance while Bai Feng was testing Zhongxian. It was very obvious that something was amiss here. Make sure not to follow her too closely. Otherwise, if she notices your presence, she would kick up a fuss with me once again. Also, I want you to investigate Zhongxian's background and identity. Somehow. I don't recall seeing his name amongst the inner disciples. Elder Bai Yi said with a wave of his hand. Yes, old master. Bai Feng nodded before taking his leave. Bai Wanqing was completely oblivious to the fact that the act she had put up together with her senior uncle had already been exposed. At this moment, she was busy practicing her swordsmanship in her room. By the 10th move, a furrow was already gradually etching itself onto her forehead. The swordsmanship imparted to her by her senior uncle was truly profound. She was able to grasp the initial phases easily and improve swiftly, but as she progressed on, she realized that the swordsmanship was a lot more layered and veiled than what appeared on the exterior. There were far too many seemingly minor yet significant details that she was unable to make sense of, causing her to frequently bump into bottlenecks. Let me consult him on this. She continued cultivating for another hour, but it felt that she was really getting nowhere at all. Thus, she got onto her aerial beast and began making her way over to the inner disciple sector. Prior to their parting at the core disciples' library, she had asked the other party here he resided at. She was able to swiftly find her way, and it didn't take long for her to reach her destination. She leaped down from her aerial beast and knocked on the doors of the residence. Jia. A middle-aged man opened the door. Upon seeing Bai Wanqing, his eyes immediately lit up as he asked in the most gentlemanly voice possible, "May I know you are?" "I am here to find Seni Min Junior Zhongxian," Bai Wanqing said. She knew that her senior uncle was unwilling to reveal his identity in public, so she dared not address him in a manner that would compromise his identity. "You are looking for our young master?" the middle-aged man asked in surprise. Of course, this middle-aged man was no other than Cao Chengli. He thought that his fame as a skilled lover had brought this beautiful lady to his door, causing his heart thump in excitement for a bit. But it turned out that she was here for their young master. He would have never thought that the dense-looking young master of his would actually have it in him after all. There was a period of time which he thought that the eccentric young master of his belonged to a certain breed of humans whose special trait was forever alone, but who could have thought that the latter would actually get entangled with such a beautiful lady within less than a day after his arrival? One must indeed not judge a person by his appearance or his character. Our young master is inside. This way, please. Cao Chengli gestured Bai Wanqing into the residence. He was just about to take the lead to guide the guest in when he suddenly recalled something. With a slightly awkward shuffle, he switched to his right leg before stepping across the doorsill. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.